Far, far back in the deep and forgotten ages, in that primal darkness before the first stones of the fledgling Imperium were hewn, before the Eldar dancers had even begun tracing their faint, luminous paths through the star-choked void, the very heavens themselves trembled under the weight of a war. Not a war of petty kings or fleeting empires, but a conflict so vast, so chillingly terrible it threatened to tear the fabric of reality asunder. This was the war in heaven, a cosmic clash where gods strode blackened battlefields and kings commanded legions that burned suns themselves as munitions. On one side stood the Necronter, a people ancient as the dust of nebulae, their existence etched with bitterness long before the conflict began. Their home world languished beneath the cancerous glow of a dying star, its light weak, cold, poison soaking into the very soil and shortening lives fraught with agonizing illnesses. Gazing longingly, obsessively at the star-strewn tapestry above, they witnessed races flourish, bathed in warm radiance, their envy a festering wound directed most fiercely at the old ones. Masters of the unseen currents of the immaterium, Nirgad-like artisans weaving reality with mere thought, the old ones thrived beneath benevolent suns, soaring through eons of life, while the Necronter withered in perpetual shadow. That envy curdled into deep-seated resentment, festering over generations into an all-consuming hatred that finally fixed like a cold, unblinking eye upon those luminous, untouchable beings. Yet their ambition was shackled by flesh-frail, disease-ridden bodies, cursed with fleeting sparks of existence, utterly inadequate vessels for such consuming hatred aimed at creatures beyond mortal comprehension. Hope, such as it was in its darkest form, arrived from the stars' whispers of the Cetan. These were entities of profound cosmic terror, enigmatic beings residing within stars, siphoning the very light and life from those cosmic furnaces across infinity. They offered the desperate Necronter an escape from their blighted mortality, true, everlasting existence, immunity from pain and decay, the power to challenge their tormentors. Their hearts heavy with the burden of survival's terrible cost yet aching for release, the Necronter dynasty reached out across the void and grasped that frigid salvation. In less time than a single cosmic heartbeat, the Cetan reshaped them. Their fragile biological forms were consumed, dissolved, replaced. Gone were fragile bones and failing organs. In their place rose gleaming constructs of intricately woven living metal, limbs articulated like clockwork marvels, faces immobile masks of featureless dignity. They became the Necrons deathless, eternal, immune to the ravages that had haunted their ancestors. But the pact was revealed to be the cruelest of deceptions. For lush immortality, they paid the ultimate toll. The Cetan devoured their very souls, slurping the core essence, the spark that had made them, leaving behind only hollow shells. Perfect metal vessels housed minds preserved, but devoid of passion, empathy, that vital spark of sentient life. They were undying, yet utterly dead inside, monuments to immortal regret trapped within necrodermis. Thus weaponized, soulless, but bound by the cold logic of vengeance and the dictates of their star-devouring patrons, the Necron legions marched to war. They descended upon the dominion of the Old Ones, and the galaxy shuddered under the tread of countless metal feet and the unholy energies unleashed by their masters. The conflict devoured realities. Stars were snuffed out like candles in a gale by Cetan hungers transformed into cosmic weaponry. Planets shattered like glass baubles under Necron Gauss beams, entire civilizations swallowed by oblivion before they could even raise a scream. The Old Ones, wielding the raw tides of the warp, fought with desperate, psychic might, birthing entire races from primordial sludge the lithe, psychic Eldar, and the brutally primordial orcs to swell their faltering ranks. Yet the tide of necrodermis was relentless, an ocean of implacable metal-crushing worlds underfoot. Unfathomable ages slipped past, measured only in the uncountable cycles of carnage, until finally, inevitably, the mighty Old Ones were hunted down, shattered, driven to the very precipice of galactic extinction. The Necrons stood conquerors, bathed in the dim glow of devastated constellations, flanked by their insatiable Cetan masters. Yet the ultimate prize, victory itself, curdled into ash on the metallic tongue of their silent king, Szarekh. He observed the scene from his vast and silent command, thrown the galaxy laid waste, inherited ruins still echoing with the screams of dying gods, the bones of entire species ground into cosmic dust, and above all, the realization blossoming cold and terrible within his ancient mind. The Cetan, these dreadful star vampires they had served, cared nothing for the Necron, nothing beyond their utility as efficient, soulless implements of destruction. They were mere tools in an endless, ravenous feast upon celestial light, pawns moved across a game board that consumed galaxies. The immortality he had sought for his people was merely an eternity of enslavement under different, more cosmic masters. This revelation Szarekh, a ruler famed for deliberation, could not bear to endure unspoken. For untold centuries, in the absolute solitude of his obsidian palace halls echoing with spectral silence, he contemplated the ruin he had unleashed. He, who had sought liberation from fleshly torment, had delivered his people into chains forged of unbreakable, soul-crushing metal and cosmic hunger. Burning repentance and cold determination fused within his undying mind. He must shatter these new chains. With meticulous, glacial care, Szarekh and his most arcane cryptex labored, weaving sciences beyond mortal ken, crafting devices of impossible containment. They called them tesseract labyrinths, dimensional prisons capable of ensnaring even the vast, chaotic energies of primordial star gods. He waited, patient as the turning of galactic arms, observing his masters, identifying their fleeting moments of satiated vulnerability when their cosmic hunger ebbed ever so slightly. Then, in a moment that ripped across the psychic remnants of the universe itself, a betrayal colder and more absolute than the void between galaxies took place. Szarekh gave a silent command only the networked minds of his bound people could perceive. Unblinking, expressionless at the incomprehensible act of regicide against their very creators, the Necron legions turned. Not in a coordinated surge, but with chilling precision, legion by legion, dynasty by dynasty, they reversed the very weapons they had used against the old ones onto the Cetan. Bolts of Gauss fire capable of stripping molecular bonds lashed out, chronomantic fields twisted temporal paths, and the tesseract labyrinths snapped shut, one after another, across the desecrated battlefield. The immense, luminous forms of the star gods screamed a silent scream that resonated through real space, shattering reality as they were torn apart, their impossible essence fragmented into innumerable glittering shards, each imprisoned within its own adamantium tomb, eternally barred from the stellar feasts they craved. The Necrons were free. But what hollow freedom remained? The galaxy they inherited was a charnel house, a broken graveyard echoing with the ghosts of cosmic genocide. The empire of the Old Ones was cosmic ash blowing on stellar winds. But the Necron dynasties themselves were shattered, fragmented, and broken. Their legions, once infinite and unconquerable, were now scattered remnants, crippled by the eons of warfare and the shocking, reckless expenditure of power required to shatter their own gods. Tomb worlds lay in shattered disrepair, sepulchres damaged by the titanic energies unleashed upon them. Worse lurked the emergent victors. The younger races, the Eldar, the Orcs, breeds spawned by the Old Ones as last-ditch weapons, now proliferating unchecked through the war-ravaged void. Though primitive beside Necron weaponry, their sheer burgeoning numbers presented an insurmountable tide for the crippled dynasties. With the terrible clarity that only utter, devastating victory can bestow, Szarekh saw the impossible truth. They could not stand now. Not like this. Not fractured, not weakened, not with rivals swarming into the void like carrion insects onto a dying leviathan. Rebuilding, mending the shattered legions and tomb vaults required peace. True peace, however, was an impossible dream in a galaxy choked with fresh turmoil. The solution, therefore, born of profound sorrow seasoned with ancient pragmatism, was stasis. Not oblivion, but perfect, silent suspension. Szarekh decreed the Great Sleep. His command resonated through the networked consciousness of his scattered people, an order steeped in profound resignation and steely purpose. Retreat. Retreat beneath the scarred crusts of dead worlds. Renew and maintain the tomb vaults. Seal yourselves in. Wait. Wait for 1,000,000 seasons, 1,000,000 cycles of galactic rotations. Wait for the storm above to abate. Wait for the strength of ages to mend broken metal mines and shattered war machines. Across devastated sectors of the void, the immense, hidden complexes were activated vast underground cities of black metal, halls wider than continents, depths plunging to planetary cores, filled with the intricate, silent architecture of stasis chambers shimmering with barely contained temporal energies. Like a slow, mournful tide, the remaining legions, silent and gleaming, marched once more not to glorious war, but into the perfect stillness of eternal waiting. Rank upon rank of necrodermis warriors, scarred by countless battles, positioned themselves in silent files within the crypts. Wraiths flickered silently into their cradles. Scarabs withdrew into skeletal alcoves. Titans of living metal, still bearing the scorch marks of warpsmiths, folded themselves into recesses large as mountainsides. The complex symphony of countless silent movements ceased. One by one, the stasis fields engaged, humming with power they would sustain for eons. Green lights winked out, metal limbs locked. Consciousnesses spiraled down into absolute dreamless torpor. The vast tomb's doors, mountains of unbreakable obsidian blackness inset with hieroglyphs telling of sorrow and vengeance, slammed shut with finality that echoed in the bedrock of planets. The last tomb seal activated. A profound, palpable stillness descended, heavier than planetary gravity, deeper than intergalactic night. The war in heaven was truly, finally over. The Necrons were gone. But Shia, the Silent King, did not join his people in that ageless, frozen slumber. The weight of his deeds, the ashes of the old ones coating his spectral soul, the muffled screams of the shattered Citan imprisoned by his command, the sight of his people reduced to silent automatons slumbering beneath galactic compost heaps it was a burden too crushing to bear witness while time crawled by. His was not a sleep earned. His destiny was penitent solitude. Without ceremony, without a word spoken across the silent gulf to his frozen subjects, he turned his gaze outward, towards the cold, infinite reach between galaxies. He would exile himself. He could not watch over the galaxy he had so utterly broken, now falling further into chaos and decay beneath the restless feet of the young, vibrant, ignorant races. He stepped into the emptiness, a single, solitary figure of impossible metal radiating ancient despair, vanishing deliberately into the uncharted nothingness that stretched forever at the rim of galactic light. He left behind a galaxy already beginning to forget, even as the truncated souls he commanded slumbered beneath its very skin. Millennia flickered past like fleeting sparks dying in brittle air. Stars swirled in their endless, indifferent dances, birthing and collapsing in fiery, silent spectacles. Civilizations bloomed like fragile crystal flowers on the ruined bones of greater things, spreading their ephemeral light and heat until, inevitably, petrifying they crumbled back to dust. Yet beneath them, locked deep within the stony hearts of nameless planets scattered like desiccated grains from the center of galactic fires to the light-starved edges of existence, the tomb worlds endured. Their vast, geometric doors remained sealed, buried under oceans of Ionian sand that whispered incessantly across lifeless deserts, or encased in kilometer-thick layers of ageless ice that cracked under the gravitational groans of dying suns, or camouflaged amidst the fiery seas of magma worlds where continents shifted like backed by the restless planetary churn. The tombs themselves, marvels of forgotten science incomprehensible to later minds, hummed with a faint energy signature shielded from detection. Their power systems, fueled by sources deep within fractured reality, pulsed in cycles older than species could imagine, safeguarding the absolute stillness within. Inside reigned a silence so profound, so utterly consuming, it was less an absence of sound and more an elemental condition, a weight pressing down on the very fabric of spacetime within those colossal, vaulted chambers. Here, within sterile fields of temporal dilation maintained by relics whispering with dark energies, slept the legions. Row upon endless row of synthetic warriors stood sentinel for ages beyond counting, articulated forms frozen in midstep. In ranks of perfect order, battle scars etched onto necrodermis that slowly, imperceptibly, flowed and healed invisibly under stasis lock. Weapons still bore the microscopic flecks of etheric energies expended tolls ago, held precisely as they had been the moment oblivion took them. Unblinking optical sensors that once blazed with cold, green fires were now dark pits of polished obsidian reflecting nothing, seeing nothing. Eons bled away. Above this restless, cosmic grave, youth arose. The elder ascended, those proud inheritors shaped by the old one's desperate gambit. Their empire unfurled across ravaged sectors like a tapestry woven from starlight and thought turned real. Centers of beauty and psychic learning bathed in millennia of peace, arrogance blossoming alongside unbridled artistic and spiritual might. Entire worlds became symphonies of living emotion, sculpted mind stuff given physical permanence. They pirouetted through the heavens, masters of time and soulflame, yet they walked upon forgotten crypts, their perception entirely blind to the nightmare slumbering just a whisper beneath the soil of worlds they painted with iridescent light. They saw barren, lifeless rocks and moved on, never dreaming of the cold metal cathedrals beneath, nor the timeless vengeance brewing there. Then came humanity. Roaring from its insignificant homeworld like a flare hurled into the void, blazing bright, brief, and unchained. Short-lived, bound by crude physics and fleets powered by demonic energies skimmed from nightmare dimensions, they surged into the galactic arena. Their spread was chaotic, violent, a firestorm consuming worlds in a feverish, relentless expansion. They forged the Imperium on an anvil of blood and conquest, an empire vast as a fallen god's grave, sprawling yet perpetually teetering on the nifage of oblivion, embroiled in perpetual toil against horrors they could barely comprehend. And even as their teeming billions dug deep into planetary crusts, thirsty for metals and minerals and ancient secrets to feed their war machine, they remained blind generations deep. They built hive cities teetering miles high upon foundations that unknowingly housed slumbering legions. They mined through veins of ore exposed by orbital bombardments, utterly unaware they penetrated the outer shielding of battleship-sized crypts containing armies from the dawn of stars. They found archaeotech marvels, structures forged of unidentifiable black stone, metal that defied known science and seemed somehow inert yet watchful. Yet these relics were labeled mere enigmatic remnants of prehuman cultures, glossed over as curiosities by obsessed scholars, scavenged for worth by barren tech priests chanting rituals of ignorance, dismissed as cosmic driftwood by commanders drunk on their own fleeting triumphs. How vast their ignorance stretched, like a frail shroud over a cosmic mausoleum. For no matter how feverishly the stars burned above, how loudly civilizations proclaimed their triumphs amidst the shifting galactic tides of fire and fear and fleeting glory, down below in the profoundest depths, the Necrons slept on. Their silence was not oblivion, but a coiled strike waiting the inevitable alarm cried across interlinked circuits through millennial deep space. A signal that would ignite ebony eyes like cursed emeralds, that would awaken coiled metallic sinews, that would unleash the patient, undying sword against the galaxy that dared to forget. They slumbered in their whispering metal cities beneath newborn triumphs, unseen, unremembered, yet eternally patient in their glacial wait for the hour of reawakening, when their vengeance, meticulously preserved through cosmic eternities, would finally unfurl. Scraping pickaxes above echoed through strata of rock, tremors radiating downwards, tickling the unreadable sensors deep within the tombs, a constant murmur felt only by silent machines biding celestial time. Below, the legions waited, perfect instruments of silent ruin, locked in the longest night, dreaming cold, metallic dreams of reclaiming a galaxy under skies they would extinguish anew. They slept with the terrible patience of continents drifting on primordial tides, their shadowed legions poised, the silent heart of their ancient empire ticking away the endless seconds with unhurried despair. Deep beneath the skin of forgotten worlds, continents adrift in the silent ocean of deep time, the necropolis endured. The tomb worlds, conceived with a patience that would shatter the fleeting minds of mortals, remained. Though epics had dissolved above, though stars had flared and died, their fundamental silence stretched eternal, vibrating only with the near-inaudible hum of ancient machinery suspended between function and slumber. Systems designed before the Great Sleep still executed their meticulous programs, their grinding processors and whispering coolant veins parsing the faint echoes of the galaxy shifting far overhead. They assessed the turbulent symphonies of burgeoning empires and collapsing civilizations, millennia of alien strife and stellar drift measured against internal chronometers, calibrated for eternity. The silence wasn't empty. It was a holding pattern, filled with the immense, quiet energy of anticipation, waiting for the precise celestial configuration, the optimal moment of galactic weakness, when the Necrons would finally shake off their enforced stillness and reclaim dominion over the stars they believed were theirs by ancient right. That chosen hour, however, remained elusive, still drifting on the currents of the unwritten future. But the tombs were ready, impossibly ready. They were built for endurance beyond the scope of mortal imagination, foundations woven from unbreakable science, designed to outlast continental drift, stellar collapse, the very heat death of existence itself. On planets ravaged by relentless geological violence, where oceans drowned vast deserts, mountains crumbled like sandcastles into featureless plains, and impenetrable forests thrust deep roots into bedrock that once held only stone. The tomb worlds simply sank deeper, vast pistons groaning under inconceivable pressures, their once mighty gateways sealed irrevocably by the accumulated mass of compressed epochs. On others, locked in the grip of perpetual winter, kilometric glaciers crawled with glacial relentlessness, glaciers older than entire species' histories, burying the mortal-lost entrances beneath ice so ancient it sang with internal fractures and pressure groans, locking the tombs away in frozen crypts of utter darkness. Yet regardless of the planetary metamorphoses, the shifting continents, the changing atmospheres, the tombs preserved their frigid content. Inside the vast, vaulted halls that were not merely structures, but extensions of the Necrons' own dispassionate grandeur, the overlords stood unmoving in their ornate stasis fields, sentinels frozen in time. Arrayed around them, stretching back into shadowed galleries too vast for any living eye to comprehend, legions of Necron warriors stood in perfect, silent ranks, monuments to martial order locked in stasis. The overlords, these once-proud kings and lords who had ruled over vast stellar dominions in bodies long since shed, had undergone that final transformation into something more profound, something undeniably eternal. Their minds, blessedly shielded from the dulling fog that engulfed the lesser ranks, retained the razor edge of intellect, though locked in a dreamless void. They remembered. Terror and glory warred within their crystalline consciousness, the dazzling zenith of the Necronter Empire, the incandescent fury of the war against the Old Ones, and the cold horror, the soul-shuddering price of the Cetan-brokered bargain biotransference, the great betrayal that had traded fragile flesh for everlasting metal nightmares. Millennia of frozen sleep had not eroded these memories. They were etched into quantum matrices harder than diamond. They knew. With an unshakable certainty only the truly immortal could possess, they knew their time would come again. They would shake off this long stillness, rise once more, and seize the galaxy, correcting the eons of wrongful ownership by fleeting, chittering life forms. And so, with the infinite patience reserved for beings unburdened by life's frantic tempo, they waited. Overhead, the dramas of the lesser races played out. Short-lived empires blossomed like unstable fungi only to collapse into ruinous decay. Desperate wars ignited and sputtered out like dying suns. The very stars themselves danced minutely in their cosmic precincts, obscuring ancient stellar paths. But deep below, cocooned in the dark womb of forgotten bedrock, the Necrons remained untouched, unchanged, eternal. Time passed over them like a ghost wind, leaving no trace. They were the fixed point in the galaxy's turbulent flux, and they knew, with cold, metallic certainty, their ascension was inevitable. For now, they wrapped themselves in the profound, cold, dark silence of their mausoleums. And the galaxy, perpetually embroiled in its own ephemeral tragedies, oblivious to the slumbering, world-ending power hidden scant kilometers beneath its scarred surface, continued its blind, ponderous spin. Countless years bled into millions. The Necrons slept, scattered beneath the ruined crust of 1,000 vanished worlds, lost to even legend. Within tombs deeper than planetary mantles, in chambers colder than the eternal void between galaxies, they lay in a perfection of stillness that mocked the concept of mortality. Their minds, intricate lattices of frozen thought, remained ensnared by stasis fields powerful enough to halt entropy locally. Their bodies, intricate cousins of living statues, exhibited no tarnish, no fatigue, utterly immune to the corrosive passage of millennia. But deep within the subterranean mechanica, within the impossibly complex, self-repairing networks woven into the very core of these tomb worlds, something stirred. Change, infinitesimal at first. A single stability monitor light flickered briefly in the profound blackness of an abandoned utility conduit. A generator, dormant since before the rise of mountains, emitted a soft, questioning hum, vibrating the dust of ages that carpeted its housing. These were not isolated tombs, but a constellation of hidden nodes scattered across the galactic plane, each one the ancestral resting place and fortress vault of a Necron dynasty entire, each governed by its own labyrinthine logic engines, a vast, silent mind dreaming of resurrection. The Necrons had constructed these complexes to endure tens of millions of years without degradation, and they had succeeded with a chilling, nearly perfect efficiency. But perfection bows only to infinity, and the finest, most redundantly shielded mechanisms, abandoned to the gnawing solitude of eternity itself, can eventually falter. On some worlds, time's persistent, unimaginably slow erosion had finally left its mark. Machinery that once pulsed with the flawless, metronomic certainty of Necron science now showed spots of entropy, a fatigue creeping into molecular bonds. Grinding, dissonant vibrations replaced the silent hum where kilometers-thick stress had subtly warped suspension fields. Power grids shimmered, their Anseseren torrents of energy faltering, sputtering with arcing discharges where eonaged conduits developed microscopic flaws. In some tomb complexes, the core functions remained operational, a precarious equilibrium held with colossal effort against the inevitable decay, systems teetering on the sheer edge of catastrophic cascade failure that could plunge entire dynasties back into broken slumber forever. In others, however, the deep signals resonated. The hidden suites of logic engines began responding to triggers written in stars long dead, initiating activation sequences held in abeyance for epochs. It was not a sudden, jarring awakening. The Necrons possessed patience as deep as time's well. Their revival was a process measured not in years, but in centuries, a glacial thaw meticulously controlled over vast cycles. These tombs were designed, above all, for prudence. They were to resurrect their chilling inhabitants only when the chaotic tapestry of the galaxy above was deemed acceptably ripe for reconquest, when the ephemeral younger races had clawed their way to sufficient advancement to make their subjugation worthwhile and their worlds viable assets. Any forestation required mature timber. But now, unexpectedly, the hidden galactic sensors recorded a deviation. In the distant, tangled skein of the galaxy, a new instability pulsed a disturbance rippling through the very fabric of the Empyrean, a realm of screaming energies forever blind and inaccessible to the Necrons with their severed connection to the psychic sea. The galaxy was cracking under the strain. The fledgling empires noted by the tomb's ancient assessment protocols had metastasized beyond prediction. The Imperium of Man, a vast, cancerous Gothic nightmare fueled by superstition and ruthless logic, sprawled across the stars, its innumerable fleets locked in grinding, perpetual warfare to maintain its ossified borders against the rising shadows. The Eldar, those ancient, decayed cousins, clinging with fragile grace and unparalleled artifice to what remained of their glory, danced their own fatal waltz on the precipice of oblivion. And beyond the faint, dim lights of known space, entities devoid of reason stirred in the writhing chaos of the warp. Horrors, demons, fascination-fetid intelligences, and threats whose origins lay beyond the comprehension of stars themselves. It was this rising cacophony, this escalating fervor of conflict and nascent, uncontrolled power that finally resonated through the tomb world's deep-time monitoring algorithms. The threshold of instability had been pierced. Slowly, steadily, a cascade propagated across the galactic network of dormant necropoli. Thousand-year-old clockwork timers, etched circuits more rock than metal, clicked over with an authority that vibrated through planetary strata. The glacial resurrection had imperceptibly commenced. On one such vessel world, long vanished from imperial star charts, its surface a bone-dry sea of dust petrified into immovable dunes, the awakening began not with light, but with a tremor. A deep, resonant vibration, felt as much as heard beneath 100 kilometers of granite and basalt, shifted dust motes that had lain undisturbed for longer than recorded human history. Beneath the planet's dead crust, in the titanic architectural arteries of its hidden tomb complex, life, a paradoxical, metallic life, began to flicker. Vast subterranean galleries, each housing scores of frozen metallic warriors ranked like spectral trees in an infinite metallic forest, pulsed faintly as dormant generators rediscovered forgotten protocols, flooding the stasis fields with energies unseen since the war in heaven. Air that had been heavier than lead for 60 million years stirred sluggishly, displaced by the subtle, planet-wide reactivation. Slowly, maddeningly slowly, obeying instructions laid down when dinosaurs were a nascent biological experiment, the first Necron warriors experienced motion. Their perfect, featureless shells, unblemished by the corrosiveness of deep time, twitched as if shaking off the faintest of cobwebs. Joints crafted from living metal ground with the friction of frozen lubricants suddenly mobile after epochs. A flicker ignited an ocular lens here, then another cold, emerald light flaring into existence in the centuries-long dark. A skeletal finger flexed with infinitesimal grace. Another warrior stood, its movement stiff, yet imbued with uncanny, silent certainty. More followed, until the chamber resonated not with cheers or alarms, but with the rhythmic, unceasing scrape and grind of countless metallic limbs transitioning from statue stasis to purpose-driven readiness. These were the Legionnaires, the undying infantry who had faced the cosmic horrors unleashed by the Old Ones. Silent, obedient automata now, their higher consciousness extinguished long ago in the process of biotransference alongside their organic form. Nothing remained but the fundamental programming of war, focused through the lens of cold directive. Their bodies, however, were inhumanly strong, tireless, programmed for slaughter countless millennia before the first ape lifted a stone as a tool. As they moved into formation, rank after rank of implacable green optics flaring in the gloom, the silent purpose with which they had conquered the heavens millennia ago returned. Above them, recessed in higher, more ornate strata, structures shimmered with the faint luminescence of awakening technologies far more complex. Here, within chambers lined with abstract hieroglyphs recounting conquests long lost to galactic history, the masters stirred. The overlords, cryptecs skilled in sciences that bent reality, and lords of ancient lineage began to revive. Their awakening wasn't a clumsy startle. It was a gradual emergence from divorced consciousness. Intelligence, sharp as the day their souls died, flooded back into cold neural matrices. These were the architects of Necron ambition, the strategic minds, beings who retained greater individuality, ambition, cunning, and the maddening pride born of eternal, unliving than the legions below. Among them, the rulers of dynasties reconstituted their sense of self, rising slowly on thrones unseen since planets were young. Each overlord remembered the obliteration of their past selves, the hubris of demanding immortality, the galactic dominion they once wielded. They knew, with a chilling resonance that vibrated through their very being, that the moment had finally arrived. The galaxy, despite its new players, was still theirs. But misfortune, like corrosion, had seeped into even their perfect tomb worlds. Not every revival unfolded with pristine grace. On worlds where geological stresses had been apocalyptic, or where system redundancies had their own failsafes fail, awakening sparked chaos. Entire subsections of immense tomb complexes had collapsed under shifts of planetary plates during deep geologic time, kilometers-thick rock sealing away entire legions in crypts deeper than graves. Elsewhere, integrity failures in stasis fields had horrific consequences. Necron warriors subjected to fluctuating chronometric energies found their metallic bodies breaking down in unexpected ways, limbs crumbling inexplicably into inert gray dust, chest components seizing and fracturing, ocular lenses dark and dead despite reactivation commands. These tomb worlds awakened to scenes of dysfunction and scrambling automation, their once-proud legions reduced to erratic constructs, stumbling drones or desiccated metal piles littering fractured galleries. For the overlords already stirred and furious in their reawakened pride, these imperfections were intolerable blasphemies against Necron supremacy. Each dynasty held its vision of the future, a strategy for galactic dominance sculpted over epochs of shared stasis. Sharing space above was a necessary expedient, but observing rivals struggle, witnessing material decay, this was perceived as weakness, evidence of inefficient governance. This fractured galaxy, teeming with warlike empires who might be foolhardy enough to strike a Necron misstep, demanded a new unity. They would need to rebuild shattered networks, renegotiate ancient alliances, anticipate rivals within their own ancient race. The great work of reclaiming the galaxy began not with outward conquest, but with the cold, internal calculus of restoring control within the ranks of the Undying. War must wait. Control must come first. And so, the galaxy shuddered on, oblivious. Plague ships rotted through imperial blockades, orc wags, reached critical mass on frontier worlds, Eldar gestured against looming prophecies, and the shadow in the warp boiled. All remained ignorant. Beneath their ruined gardens and ruined cities, beneath seabeds and polar ice caps, in places erased from every galactic map, the Necrons stirred. The glacial awakening spread. Some tombs flickered to life with the efficiency of a timepiece wound after stopping, legions forming soundlessly beneath stone. Others awoke screaming silently, grinding against entropy and failure. The ancient legions, countless and patient, flexed newly mobile limbs. the prelude had ended. The time of the Great Reclamation began, planned over epochs, but entered deliberately, cautiously. The galaxy belonged to the Necrons. It was a matter of cold certainty, and the gathering mass of metal beneath its foundations would soon demonstrate it. Yet the promised singular empire did not rise seamlessly from the dust-plagued depths. The Necrons possessed immortality, their unity did not. Fractured by incalculable time, eroded by isolation, as planetary tombs sank deeper into geological obscurity, and further wounded by the lingering wounds of the war in heaven fought long before humanity crawled from the mud, the dynasties did not coalesce but diverged. Each emerging power cloaked in silent tombs and resurgent might held its own singular, inflexible vision of the future. With distinct ambitions taking form and separate designs solidifying upon a galaxy, transformed almost beyond recognition in their absence, the fractured nature of this eternal return became stark. Among the jostling powers clawing their way back to galactic prominence, the Szarekh dynasty surged with ruthless intent. At its heart sat Imhotep the Stormlord, a mind as sharp and cold as the necrodermis plating that encased him, sculpted by experiences stretching back to the Necronter's bloody origins as he led armies even then. Death by biotransference hadn't stilled his strategic intellect, it had merely purified it, adding the perspective of eternity. His dynasty became aggression incarnate, favoring expansion through overwhelming, calculated violence. To Imhotep, the galactic map was a tactical overlay, the chaotic splendor of its younger inhabitants mere obstacles possessing a transience bordering on insignificance ephemeral things of unstable flesh and blood emotions. He viewed their towering, teeming Terran imperium, the degenerate artistry of the fading Eldar, all the uncounted species clawing upwards, with unequivocal contempt. Nobles used to courtly murder and political webs were nothing. These monsters were grubs infesting Necron real estate. Their civilizations, despite their fleeting barbaric splendor, were inherently brittle, easily shattered beneath the unyielding, eternal discipline and overwhelming technological supremacy of the Szarekh legions. Armed with legions gleaming like chiseled obsidian, undying warriors following directives with flawless coordination, supported by vast flotillas of crescent ships humming with the death song of Gauss weaponry, and governed by Imhotep's unparalleled strategic genius, a mind mapping probable outcomes across millennial timelines, the Stormlord initiated the practical work of restoration through swift, decisive conquest. He maneuvered pieces on a star chart battlefield vast beyond comprehension, each calculation precise and detached. Imhotep was, however, far from the only master of a revived dynasty nursing ambitions to chart the future of the Necron species. Millions of light years distant, dwelling within its own fortified network of geographically isolated tomb worlds, meticulously hidden from even center probes designed for dimensional anomalies, the Nihilak dynasty awoke, guided by different stars. Commanded by Trazyn the Infinite, an overlord whose pride wasn't measured in territorial gains, but in the immaculate preservation and meticulous curation of Necron accomplishment and history, they emerged. To the Nihilak, heirs to the true zenith of Necron culture, the imperatives lay not in mindless acquisition, but in restoration. Not just of power, but of form, function, identity, according to the precise, sacred standards of the distant past. Trazyn embodied the guardian archetype, utterly devoted to the flawless preservation of Necron heritage, down to the last shimmering atom of biotransference decorative filigree on a common soldier's weapon. Where the Szarekh embraced brutal pragmatism and planned ceaseless interstellar warfare, the Nihilak believed in rebuilding the splendor, the pomp, the correctness of what was, following every elaborate ceremony and ritualized interaction imposed by millennia of tradition encoded into logic matrices. Their tomb worlds appeared less like barracks and far more like vaulted archives combined with museums of impossible antiquity, containing stasis vaults suspending relics from empires long dust upon other worlds. Their warriors are fewer perhaps than those the Szarekh drudged from stone, each one a polished marvel, gleaming with technological perfection and ancient ritual markings restored with fanatical devotion. Trazyn, meticulously cataloging newly awakened holdings within his extensive personal gallery dimension, inside solemnness. a collection encompassing everything from perfect Tyrannid Ripper swarms to misplaced Primarch artifacts, observed Emotic's banner raging across galactic subsectors with a profound disdain. To the noble infinite, the Stormlord's blunt, relentless bludgeoning of adversaries and apparent lack of reverence for the aesthetic grace and political nuance of ancient Necron rulership constituted not efficiency, but crude barbarism unworthy of a being elevated to command stars. It revealed a profound lack of the dignity and ingrained elegance Trazyn insisted was the birthright of their race. Emotic lacked the aristocratic bearing essential for true galactic guidance. The sheer vastness of the galaxy, littered with enemy empires demanding burning away, necessitated a certain level of tolerance initially. Space enough existed for two vastly different philosophies operating concurrently without immediate, fearsomely destructive confrontation. Szarekh and Nihilak expanded cautiously in different orbits, assessing openings, consolidating awakened Tomb World resources, securing Forgotten World engines drifting in the black. A brittle truce existed, an absence of overt hostility born more of sheer vast distance, and the pressing need to assess the unfamiliar galactic stage than any genuine affinity. But between them, evident in the harshly coded subsonics of forgotten comm frequencies, in the minute orbital adjustments tinged with hostility around resource-rich disputed systems, and most chillingly, within the coldly evaluating optics of each ancient lord as he measured the other's weaknesses, a tension hummed, low and dangerous. It was an electric precursor, the gathering ozone sent before a Necronter thunderstorm. The immortal dynastic rivalry had merely been thawed, not erased. Competition for resources, for strategically vital worlds bordering claimed territories, for ancient Necron artifacts whose reacquisition held cultural or strategic weight, would inevitably collide. The galaxy remained unaware that its ancient landlords had woken and fractured upon the moment of their return. Deep beneath the scarred surfaces of worlds long forgotten, an ancient certainty pulsed through the living metal veins of the Necron overlords. A collision was etched into their starless future like glyphs upon a tomb. Both Emotic, his mind ablaze with schemes that spanned galaxies, and Kutlak, a fortress of unwavering tradition, laid unyielding claim to the mantle of the Necronter's true heir, forces of will forged in the same unbreakable metal, incapable of bending before the other. Yet a vaster, older shadow consumed their looming contest, a stillness deeper than the void itself, the shadow cast by the spectral presence of Szarekh, the Silent King. It was Szarekh whose guiding hand had steered the desperate Necronter hosts towards that desperate compact with the star-devouring Cetan, a bargain that echoed with the screams of a billion souls sacrificed in a crucible of living metal. It was Szarekh who had whispered the command to surrender their flesh and flee the dying war-torn galaxy into the cold embrace of the Great Sleep, empires dissolving into scattered tombs. Broken beneath the crushing weight of his creation, the horror of what biotransference had truly wrought etched into his eternal consciousness, Szarekh had cast himself adrift after the war in Heaven's final, cataclysmic note, a solitary wraith sailing the infinite, empty gulfs between galaxies, lost in a silent, suffocating ocean of guilt and the bitter taste of irreversible regret. But the silent orbit had shifted. Szarekh had returned. The Silent King, a title now heavy with absence, had observed unseen from the deepest folds of darkness as his shattered people groaned back into a semblance of wakefulness. His undying gaze absorbed the fractured vista of his former empire. Dynasties splintered like cracked obsidian, ancient grudges flaring anew into rivalries that poisoned the tomb-laden stars, the proud Necron race unspooling at this critical nexus in the long coil of time. Szarekh possessed millennia of cold cognition. He was no credulous fool seduced by ancient glories. He apprehended with chilling clarity how the galaxy had metabolized unknown epochs, reconfiguring in ways his vast foresight could never have charted. The younger race's primitive, ephemeral sparks in the cosmic dark had nevertheless climbed the pillars of creation, stitching fragile empires across the stellar fabric, their very existence a chaotic tremor in the universe's bones. Though an individual Necron arcology could spool annihilation across star systems, the race itself lay fragmented, its unfathomable power diluted across squabbling lordships, a pale ghost of its unified prime. Szarekh's return burgeoned not from naked conquest, ache, but the desperate yearning for cohesion. He stalked the tomb worlds not as its plunderer, but its surgeon wielding the scalpel of unity. The Silent King carved the singular vision, reconstitution. The obliteration of dynastic borders, the gathering of every scattered shard of Necron power beneath the banner he once held absolute, the forging from the shards a new, seamless empire, a monolith as cold and eternal as the universe itself, poised to reclaim its ordained dominion over the starfields. Yet the path he carved was strewn with the rusted chains of dead loyalty and the razor-edged shards of burgeoning ambition, its terrain far denser than the void he traversed. For Szarakh's authority, once vaporizing dissent at its utterance, now hung precariously over dynastic councils, probed, fractured, and outright questioned by overlords who awoke to find the throne terrifyingly vacant. Imodic the Stormlord, his mind a tempest of stratagems weaving galactic subjugation, surveyed the Silent King's arrival not with dutiful reverence, but with the piercing suspicion of a rival alpha scenting territorial claim. This pharaoh of the Szarekh, architect of relentless military expansion, clutched his legions close. He would not bend his metallic knee before any master, not even the architect of their damned salvation, not even the legend returned. For Szarekh, this newly vital galaxy unveiled itself not as a prize to seize, but a wild furnace demanding order's quenching touch. The screaming short-lived younger races were peril incarnate, far beyond mere distraction. They were vectors of an accelerating entropy, an abhorrent chaos that gnawed at the universe's essential stability like a parasite at bone. Szarekh bore a conviction forged in the crucible of deep time. The Necrons, firstborn inheritors and undisputed masters of the known cosmos, were burdened by an ancient duty. The burden to impose perfect, unwavering order upon the seething chaos, to shackle or utterly excise these stumbling usurpers before their heedless, grasping expansion ignited the universe into an unthinkable pyre of ruin. Yet the Silent King's spectral resurgence achieved more than just the projection of a unifying dream. It became the ignition spark for sleeping animosities, an amplifier echoing the latent arrogance and hunger slumbering deep within the Crown Worlds. Overlords like Imodic sharpening their wills like phase blades, and Kutlak fortifying his citadels of tradition, maneuvered ceaselessly within the intricate necropolitics, their gazes fixed beyond the parochial concerns of their own tomb spheres, reaching towards the nebulous shape of the Necron race's ultimate fate. Whispers cultivated like toxic spores within shadowed crypts. Perhaps Szarakh's time was a chapter permanently closed, that the Silent King, despite the echoing chambers of his wisdom, was a fossil encased in the obsidian strata of an irrecoverable epic. Conversely, sharp minds calculated trajectories of advantage, seeing in his doubtful legitimacy a fulcrum to elevate their own regimes, aligning their tombs outwardly to his visions solely to dominate the ascendant hierarchy coalescing around the nascent core. The stage's gears, oiled by time and friction, engaged with an unavoidable click. Conflict, ancient and intricate, was its indomitable conclusion. Not the crude clash of Gauss streams and phased molecules lighting the void, not the brutal language of destroyers and death marks, but a subtler, infinitely more merciless warfare, a war waged in the shadowed vaults of courtly politics, a symphony of intrigue resonating with the cold echoes of ambition beyond comprehension. Here, amidst the silent, gleaming halls, the fractured future of their entire immortal species would be decided blow by calculated blow. Imodic perpetually craved expansion, his strategies endless drills boring into galactic bedrock. Kutlak encased the crumbling relics of the past in adamantine memory, retreating into static perfection. And Szarekh strained against the fractures, screaming silently for unity. While their metallic hearts pulsed with ancient energies, the younger races wheeled and bargained and fought beneath a sky oblivious to the glacial convergence happening beneath their feet, unaware of the utterly inhuman storm brewing in the crushing static silence of the tomb vaults. A storm distilled from eternity itself. The Necrons, once a single titan whose shadow blotted galaxies, now manifested as a constellation of fractured monoliths, each tomb complex and isolated star, each dynasty deploying its honed strategies for influence across the incomprehensible void. But one terrifying constant solidified through the eons: their indestructibility. Whilst the fleeting mortals scrambled over the ruins of impermanent dominions, the Necrons endured. They were the cold constant, the underlying bedrock of existence. Forgotten? It was impossible. Their name, steeped in dread, would be carved into the stars once more. Only in the profoundest marrow of the tomb worlds, where silence coagulated into tangible weight and the timelines twisted under the sheer pressure of forgot epics, was the supreme Necron secret sequestered, hidden far beyond the worth of legions on parade or cyclopean obelisks manifesting formless annihilation. This secret transcended mere dominion. It emerged as the defining, terrifying essence, the horrifying gift that elevated them beyond conquerors, beyond consciousness trapped in metal, into something utterly, dreadfully other. It was the merciless engine of immortality itself, the power that detached them utterly from the organic decay infecting others crawling beneath flawed skies. And this ultimate, conceptual engine, the key to their cosmic permanence, resided entirely within the arcane purview of the cryptex. These cryptex served as the true technomancers, the mercurial keepers of sciences, so ancient and profound their nature veered into palpable sorcery, comprehending realities that dissolved logic as solar winds scatter dust. Guardians of mechanisms that whispered directly to the universe's iron core, masters of temporal dissonance and fundamental reconstruction. Ultimately, their fathomless understanding created the unassailable barrier between the Necron and the abyss of oblivion. Across labyrinthine depths buried beneath mountains of dead rock, where air had abandoned any pretense of movement and light from any star dared not penetrate the suffocating layers of forgotten histories, beneath even the bone-deep chill of resurrecting warriors, and the silent, drifting canopies of gravitide-fying tombs, pulsing with dormant malice, fundamental truths locked down deep. Within this stagnant darkness, hidden beneath continents of compressed time, rests the Necrons' supreme treasure, infinitely surpassing the value of marching phalanxes that atomize enemies or skeletal monuments broadcasting doom. This heart of their power constitutes the crucible of their being, the mystical endowment that redefines them beyond mere empire builders or trapped minds wielding unnatural force. It becomes the raw, terrifying essence of eternal existence itself, the horrifying state that irrevocably isolates them from the brief, frantic flicker of the organic. It is the gift, or perhaps the unspeakable curse of immortality, intrinsically linking them to time's endless, indifferent river. This sacred flame flickering in the static void, the core engine ensuring their survival beyond entropy's grasp, depends utterly upon the enigmatic custodianship of the cryptex. These cryptex, the true and ultimate technomancers of the deathless race, were the inheritors and sole interpreters of that undying flame. The keepers of wisdom so primordial it wore the guise of dark magic more than mundane science, possessing an intimate fluency with the universe's cryptic latticework that mocked the limited perceptions of transient species. It was their inscrutable genius that wove the impossible threads of perpetuity into each Necron's unending frame. The dynasties reanimated as one would oil a vast, rusted machine awakening from abyssal slumber, their monolithic structures unbending even after eons of perfect stillness, yet stirred now by the infinitely complex gears of ambition and veiled conflict turning within. Their rulers, though clad in incorruptible necrodermis and burdened by the desolate paths of immortality, remain perpetually susceptible to the grasping, metallic fire of supremacy. Thus, shaking free the dust of 60 million years, they rise, setting into inevitable motion an era primed for conflict on a scale mortals cannot grasp, and for dominion sought with glacial implacability. The galaxy slumbers on peacefully, dreaming its short-lived dreams entirely unaware that the ancient architects of its darkest nightmares have recalibrated. The dynasties, repositories of accumulated vigil for epochs beyond number, harnessed to untold ambitions wicked as void itself, will inevitably assert their name once more onto the blazing tapestry of known space. Theirs is the patience of stone and suns. They will return. Imagine, then, the supreme intellects, the cryptex minds that once, even clad in fleeting flesh, were the unparalleled luminaries of their age, sculpting the fabric of reality as a potter shapes clay. Now, transformed into beings of thought and sentient metal, their power transcends those early glories. Freed from the squalor of decaying biology, unfettered by the mortal coil they so spectacularly shed alongside their kin, their consciousness operates on a plane uninhibited. While their Necron brethren became ensnared in the ceaseless machinery of conquest and dynastic squabbles, the cryptex followed a singular path. a fathomless plunge into the universe's most profound secrets. They are obsidian scholars in silent tombs, forever probing the dark heart of existence. At the pulsating core of their supremacy lies the Resurrection Protocols, an arcane technological edifice shielded by millennia of accumulated knowledge and colossal vanity. These are no mere repair routines, but ancient, sacrosanct sciences allowing the Necron legions to claw back from annihilation again, and infinitely beyond. Death to the cryptex is not a terminus, merely an inconvenient interruption. They operate the machinery of eternal recursion, ensuring the dynasty's flow with the unending, viscous lifeblood of reconstitution. When a Necron warrior falls upon the battlefield of some doomed world, its form fracturing, showers of metallic shards scattering, the miracle begins. The sentient necrodermis stirs that mercurial, living metal twists, flows back towards its origin, binding shattered limbs, reknitting silver bone structures with glacial, implacable purpose. Yet this phantom puppetry, this self-healing metal, is merely the overture. True power resonates from deep within the tombs, from the sanctums where cryptex toil. Their control, their unfathomable sciences command the grand symphony of resurrection on a galactic scale. Entire armies dissolve into glittering ruin only to coalesce anew moments later, regenerated with an efficiency that chills the soul. To witness, it is to see time flow backwards for destruction alone, a wave of death reversing its own tide. Do not mistake the protocols as mere mechanics or biological mimicry. They are the ultimate expression of cryptech mastery over the very bedrock rules of life and extinction. Leveraging secrets ripped from the quantum void, weaving uncanny forces that manipulate matter and entanglement like a child needs clay, they have refined resurrection to an art form. To their crystalline minds, it is pure science, toweringly advanced, infinitely complex, though to the fleeting, flesh-bound races huddling beneath the gaze of the stars, it might as well be the blackest sorcery. Through this ultimate act of defiance against entropy, the cryptex hold the sacred key to the Necrons' cardinal strength. Implacable endurance, the capacity to outwait galaxies, to return, unyielding, century after millennium after epoch. Yet these arcane artificers are no mere custodians of the Legion's repair cycle. They stand far above such a menial designation. Within the great Necron dynasties, the cryptex occupy a stratum of influence profound and unassailable. They are not the warrior kings, bellowing orders from skeletal thrones, nor the overlords weaving intricate webs of command. Their worth lies deeper, primal. They possess the singular knowledge that underpins the race's very existence. Strip away the cryptex, let their vigilance falter, and the sacred resurrection protocols would crumble into cosmic dust. The vast Necron armies would become nothing more than lifeless constructs, shattered clockwork incapable of rising once shattered, their vaunted immortality revealed as a mocking lie. This monopoly on survival grants them unique leverage, an understanding that permeates the icy calculus of Necron court politics. No pharaoh, however mighty, draped in ancient starlight and commanding fleets of scarabs, can afford to earn the enmity of their cryptex. The cryptex know their indispensable nature, wear it like a mantle of absolute authority. Though technically they serve the dynasties, a subtle aura of superiority radiates from them, a cold amusement at the purely martial or political concerns of their peers. They exist slightly askew from the rigid militaristic hierarchies, their independence fiercely guarded, their sanctuary maintained by the terrifying, existential necessity of their craft. Often, they are entities of deep eccentricity, minds perpetually adrift on tides of esoteric research and experimentation, oblivious to the transient squabbles of rulership or martial posturing. Some vanish for centuries, swallowed by the labyrinthine depths of their sanctums or venturing into the lightless gulfs between stars, lost in contemplation of impossible theorems or the delicate tuning of foundational code, only to abruptly rematerialize bearing gifts as terrible as they are revolutionary. An enhancement to the resurrection algorithm, a weapon that unravels spacetime, a vessel that slips between dimensions. But for all their cherished autonomy, they remain susceptible to the ancient feuds and power plays that stain Necron society like oxidization upon necrodermis. Among their glinting number exist rivalries focused on the very heart of their purpose, the perfection of resurrection itself. Figures like Anra K'Acher, the Traveler, A cryptek whose renown vibrates across tomb worlds embodies this relentless drive. His path winds through forgotten stellar graveyards, seeking knowledge in the rubble of lost civilizations or the whispering echoes of dead stars, forever questing to refine the protocols, to make revival faster, more certain, more magnificent. To Anra's intricate mind, the Necron future hinges not solely on resurrection, but on transcendent evolution. He sees flaws within the seemingly perfect system, weaknesses to eliminate, ensuring his race ascends unchained, unstoppable, without fear of permanent erasure from the cosmic ledger. Not all comrades share Anra's singular focus. Others, like the inscrutable Orokin the Diviner, weave their genius along darker threads. His obsessions lie not solely with the return from death, but with the very current of time itself. He practices the chilling arts of chronomancy, plotting the writhing skeins of destiny, seeking points to nudge, to influence, to control. For Orokin, the resurrection protocols are a crutch, a stopgap measure employed by the unimaginative. His vision unfolds across the fractured timelines. True power lies in mastering the flow of existence so utterly that no Necron warrior ever needs resurrection in the first place, perfect battles fought in moments predestined for flawless Necron victory, where death itself becomes an avoidable accident in a perfectly orchestrated eternity. These divergent trajectories, these opposing philosophies of eternal existence evolution versus temporal control create a pervasive current of tension, electrifying the silent councils of the crypteks. Each is a demigod of intellect with a personal vision for the Necron destiny, a perfect future meticulously calculated. While they unifiedly maintain the sacred protocols, ensuring the skeletal legions rise anew after each shattering, their true ambitions, their ultimate yearnings, extend far beyond the din of mere battlefields. For the crypteks, immortality is merely the foundation. They seek nothing less than its apotheosis, the reshaping of the universe's laws to their inexorable will. Witness the scope of their terrible ambition. Some, their minds crackling with forbidden spatial theorems, pioneer translocation technologies of staggering complexity, devising mechanisms to throw entire armies instantaneously across the abyss of interstellar voids, enabling Necron legions to manifest like nightmares erupting from nowhere upon any world, at any moment's notice. Others descend into the maddening mysteries of quantum shielding, weaving barriers of pure, resonant energy from the thin, probabilistic fabric of reality itself, shields capable of shrugging off, perhaps reflecting, even the universe's most cataclysmic ordnance. Each cryptek architect strives to inscribe their indelible signature upon the iron destiny of the Necron race. Their experiments and chilling inventions thread futures so divergent and overpowering that even the pharaons, scheming in their stasis-lit courts, cannot always perceive the paths being forged within the depths of the crypteks, hidden workshops. In perpetual penumbra they labor, minds generating counterintuitive energies, pushing the decaying envelope of hyperscience into realms where physics screams. The resurrection protocols, though millennia-old pillars of their power, are merely tools in eternal refinement, endlessly optimized by entities who perceive in them not just a vital martial function, but a potent symbol, the definitive proof of the Necron's absolute mastery over the eternal void of death. It is solely through the protocols that the Necrons lay claim to true eternity. Their legions emerge relentlessly from their silent tomb citadels, whole, implacable, undiminished, regardless of how many times they are broken upon the anvil of war. The fragile empires of the galaxy's infant races cannot grasp, dare not comprehend the horrific reality that is a Necronter become Necron. Their temporary lives flicker out like guttering candles, their sovereignties bloom and wither like desert flowers. To their limited perceptions, a phalanx of marching silver skeletons is merely an unstoppable, mindless engine of destruction, an incoming storm of unfeeling metal incapable of true defeat, seemingly possessing infinite endurance. They do not perceive the icy intellectual torrent flowing just behind those gleaming phalanxes. They do not sense the presence of the crypteks, their consciousness diamond-hard, their calculations unfolding across millennia, ceaselessly tending the flame of unending existence. They work to ensure not just a victory today, but the indestructible tyranny of their kind, flourishing blindingly forever into a featureless cosmic future, far beyond mortal comprehension. Deep within the lightless, acoustically null chambers of their tomb worlds, entombed for vast eons yet perpetually vigilant, the Necrons hoarded more than their own undying forms. They preserved the apocalyptic engines, the dreadful implements that had shattered gods and extinguished starfares in their ancient prime. While younger species forged crude cannonades that vomited kinetic fury, billowing fire and cacophony only to be stilled, buried, forgotten, the Necrons wield instruments conceived by beings who solved entropy and spatial geometry during epochs when Terra was primordial slime. Theirs is not the art but the pure, unadulterated science of obliteration. Their weapons do not just slay, they meticulously disassemble, dissolve, unstitch, erase. Consider the dread armories of the dynasties. Preeminent among the horrors carried by silent legions is the ubiquitous Gauss Flayer. To hasty, ignorant eyes, it appears merely a cold, austere rifle, elegant in its minimalism, its power vaguely suggested in the ghostly emerald glow emanating from its twin prongs. But this assessment betrays devastating ignorance. Its mechanism is terminal physics made manifest. It tears molecular bonding apart layer by agonizing layer, atom by irreplaceable atom. It is ultimate entropy unleashed at a distance. Whether confronting the adamantium hulls of an imperial land raider or the chitinous leviathan mass of a tyrannid biomonstrosity, the Gauss Flayer operates with repellent even-handedness. Both colossal Werngin and chittering swarmbeast alike are ruthlessly stripped, dissolved into an expanding bloom of featureless, non-living dust. It shows neither rage nor preference, merely executes the absolute reduction mandated by its coded intention. Yet the Gauss Flayer stands as but a single horror among countless others meticulously catalogued in the infinite arsenal of these ageless, stainless demiurges of annihilation. More potent, more terrifying iterations exist. The sweeping Gauss cannons, mounted upon the fluid, silent nightmare eskimers called annihilation barges, or clutched by the terrifying immortals who stride through hails of fire unscathed. These terrible weapons reduce fortresses carved into mountains to collapsing cavities, their beam of void-green light searing outwards with the cold certainty of an equation being solved, disintegrating its path through steel, stone, and starlight alike. The scar they leave upon the landscape speaks not of heat or sound, but of matter ceasing to be. The very soil recoils, warped and vitrified by the unnatural forces scarfing away at the fundamental layers of creation. But the scope of Necron weaponry, endlessly refined by the cryptex technosorcery, a worldview where wonders and horrors are indistinguishable sides of the same hyperscience coin, transcends mere molecular dismantling. There exists the Tesla cannon, its name echoing with an unsettling history lost even to its wielders. It emits not a singular devouring beam, but chains of crackling, leaping arcs of soul-frozen lightning. Unlike the systemic, dispassionate consumption of Gauss weaponry, Tesla is chaos unleashed in energized form, bolts screaming across battlefield spaces to punch through armored forms, sear fragile biological tissue to cinders, and dance insidiously onwards to the next victim, and the next, riding chains of electrocuted death. Even vehicles forged to withstand high explosives find themselves crippled husks, vast circuits fused into molten slag, engines screaming their death knell amidst the relentless electric slaughter, courtesy of Necron ingenuity. Then exist the more blasphemous tools, the instruments that touch upon the skeleton of reality itself, the particle whip and the psychophagic resonance siphon. These transcend mere crude ballistic impact or thermal vaporization. They strike at the dimensional integrity of the universe. The particle whip, often mounted high upon the pyramidical, gravitide-defying doomsday arc, unleashes a focused stream of accelerated particles at velocities approaching luminiferous limits. Entire battalions disappear in the blink of an eye, not exploded, but annihilated on the fundamental particulate level. The true horror lies in its execution, a silent predator. One instant, ranks of warriors bristle with defiance. The next, shadows eerily smeared onto the blasted landscape. Their annihilation resonates solely as absence. Reality itself seems to quietly erase them without a whimper, their existence snipped out like an unneeded thread in the cosmic tapestry. Similarly terrifying, but functionally alien stands the death ray, that designation feeling now almost quaintly inadequate, a beam of purest entropic energy, so intense it slices moons into ruinous halves, and goes through the heaviest voidship armor, as though it were nebular mist. Employed by the moonwalking apexes of combat known as doom scythes, this scalpel of oblivion defines precision. Where armies mass-fared pointless kinetic torrents or rivers of burning plasma in vain hope, the Necron beam remains ruthlessly singular: one sweep, 1 second, and the obstacle ceases to exist, the obstructive material cut away with surgical indifference, revealing the unavoidable truth. Utter, silent void. No catalog could be complete without the monolith, their most towering, iconic embodiment of dread upon fractured battlefields. To the untrained eye, perhaps fevered dreaming in panic, it resembles a sepulchral monument. A vast, looming geometric shape, hovering silently, a pyramid wrought from deepest obsidian stone interlaced with emerald circuitry fires. But this edifice is not dormant. A furious monument it may be, but its primary purpose defines nightmare active. This terrible shape operates as an unliving fortress and unstoppable weapon platform fused. Its gleaming silver flanks bristle with weapon mounts unleashing Gauss flux arcs and that horrid particle whip energy, dominating tactical spaces with calculated swathes of multidimensional destruction. Worse, infinitely worse, the monolith serves as a vortex gateway into unspeakable reserves. From its deepest, lightless chambers, portal gates pulsate with cold, sickly energies. And through them, step unfeeling legions of reforged Necron warriors and implacable immortals, a tsunami of silver death unending, pouring forth directly onto the contested ground to possess it utterly. The genuine transcendent terror associated with the monolith stems not only from its firepower or its function as a marching fort, but its refusal to succumb. Sculpted from self-regenerating necrodermis living metal, it manipulates its own shattered form with alien swiftness. Craters vast enough to devour an imperial night flashed open by concentrated titanfire blur and vanish in the space of a panicked breath as the monolith's carapace flows liquidly back again into ordered structure. While the proud tanks of lesser races explode into fragments, their engines choked on boiling oils and shattered cogitators, the monolith reforms silently amid the hellstorm. Strike it anywhere its apex, its foundations, its implied vital cores it categorically refuses defeat, no true weak point is rendered visible. It stands as a totem of their race, concretized eternity, undeniable resilience, immaculate in application. Unyielding, merciless, regenerative. Final, unbreakable. Know also that this dreadful inventory merely scratches the surface. Greater abominations rest within the lightless vaults of tomb worlds. The Necrons' technological savagery extends to constructs capable of stellar genocide. Planet-sized war spheres known as world engines orbit stars, ignored by the mewling younger races, silent until they awaken to reposition stars and destroy suns. This, then, is the essence of the Necrons. Cold intellects wielding millennia-perfected sciences not as tools for enlightenment, but as architecture for dominance painted in the colors of truly infinite, relentless destruction. Against them stand others, ephemeral races screaming their defiance amidst explosive fireworks that fade rapidly. Facing the silent unlife of Necrons radiating from sculpted weaponry, forged before the ancestors of humanity had crawled onto land, they face not merely an army, but an unspeakable epic embodied. Perfection of death science engineered by ascended intellects who sacrifice their souls only to weaponize the universe's fundamental laws against life itself. A force whose true signature, etched not in fire, but in the cold mathematical void of absence. The very machines of the Necrons whispered power on a scale that rendered planetary conquests mundane, their might calibrated to snuff out entire stars, whole clusters of worlds reduced to cosmic dust beneath the annihilating kiss of their weaponry. Such destructive potential spoke volumes of the unutterable magnitude woven into the dark, crystalline heart of Necron ambition. Where lesser species scrabbled for control over mud balls or their adjacent void, the Necrons cast their gaze infinitely outward, encompassing the galaxy itself as mere potential territory, dominion measured in stellar masses. Amongst these ultimate implements of subjugation sat the Tesseract vaults, cyclopean containment prisons holding the furious, fragmented remnants of celestial beings betrayed. It was here the terrifying, absolute command of the Necrons over the fundamental structures of reality became manifest. Shattered Catan, entities born of the cosmos's fiery dawn and worshipped as gods, were entombed within titanic matrices of impossible geometry, their infinitudes of cosmic power imprisoned, contained, hardwired by masters who were once their slaves. To unleash a tesseract vault upon the battlefield was to momentarily slice open reality and spill forth the raw, furious heartstuff of creation. A mere projection of intent, a psychic trigger pulled by an uncaring overseer, could summon energies capable of unraveling continents, vaporizing mountains, and scouring life from entire regions. Witnessing the unleashed Catan, even bound and throttled by Necronter mastery, was to stand witness to a storm of creation and destruction embodied, the universe's own fury turned into a caged weapon diminished, yet undiminished in its capacity for absolute annihilation. Alongside these celestial engines stalk the tireless enforcers, the Canoptech constructs, echoes of silent but horrifying purpose. Legions of scarab constructs, minute armored carapaces glittering like malevolent stars on a dark beach, scuttled inexorably forward, their mandibles a galaxy-scale plague able to grind ceramite, adamantium, and even organic resilience down to constituent atoms with remorseless, all-consuming hunger, leaving only whispering dust where titans once stood. And where the scarabs consumed, the wraiths hunted, phantasmal hunters phasing through bulkheads and bedrock alike, their elongated forms flickering between states of being, their claws honed by craft older than species. They struck from literal nothingness, bypassing all barriers to shred defenses and the soft flesh behind them with silent, lethal precision before vanishing again. These weapons, this arsenal of apocalypse, did not spring from fearful haste or the desperate need to survive. They bore no resemblance to the crude, noisy butchery of the orcs nor echoed the fiery, faith-soaked zealotry of the Imperium's tools. They were expressions of pure, refined mathematics made manifest destruction, forged in the furnaces of cold, emotionless logic, designed over eons for maximum efficiency, deployed without passion or pity towards a singular and remorseless goal. The Necrons engaged in war not for fleeting honors or the hollow satisfaction of conquest, but for the inescapable destiny of absolute, galactic holoscale dominance, the reclamation of every atom stolen during their cosmic slumber. If the stars themselves stood as obstacles to this regained empery, then they too would be unmade, the firmaments cracked like flawed porcelain, the celestial tapestry rent by ancient hands wielding engines of singular, inevitable destruction. Vastly removed from the petty clashes over scarce worlds, in the profound and silent gulfs where solar systems huddled like lost children abandoned on an infinite dark plane, the Necrons commanded an arcane art utterly denied all their galactic successors. They traversed the fathomless voids faster than mere light of feet, unbelievable to races grappling with primitive reaction drives or volatile dimension shunts, but this was no elementary acceleration, nor a straightforward breach through mundane physical limitations. The Necrons had long dissected time and space itself, reducing their enigmas to executable functions within an impossible machine, the cognitive heart of which resided within the enigmatic dolmen gates. These monolithic constructs, colossal slabs of unknowable material etched with glyphs that defied understanding, stood as silent sentinels across tomb worlds and barren moons, reduced by the uninitiated eye to mere titanic, ancient monoliths, markers of a forgotten time. Yet when summoned to activation, their surfaces thrummed with contained power, shimmering like heat haze above desert stones before resolving into impossibly rippling portals, serene yet unnerving, akin to a vast placid lake startled by a solitary drop. Through these gates, entire phalanxes of Necron soldier lords could transition sliding between points separated by millennia of mere starlight travellas effortlessly as one might step across a chamber threshold. The immense tableau of the galaxy, with its uncounted worlds, forsaken nebulae, and treacherous empty gulfs, offered no barrier to the inheritors of the stars. Opposedly, the fledgling species lumbered through fathomless peril. The Imperium of Man, in its staggering but ultimately fragile might, gambled existence itself, plunging into the soul-destroying unpredictability of the warpen ocean of unfettered insanity that lurked beneath the veneer of reality for every traversal. The Eldar, graceful relics the newcomers consider ancient, glided along the webway's secret, subdimensional Tunnelsa residual cobwebbed network inherited from greater times. But the Necrons, Their disdain for such perilous gambits and capricious pathways was supreme. Long before the foundational dreams of escape from Terra could form within embryonic human consciousness, an eternity preceding the Eldar crafting their labyrinth, the Necrons had already conceived and raised their dolmen gates as perfect solutions. These mechanisms did not trespass into the perilous deeps of the warp, nor flirt with non-Euclidean spatial riddles. They operated within the clean, unyielding architecture of the universe's fabric itself. The gates allowed the Necrons to pierce the very veil, cutting distance down to an irrelevant abstraction, permitting instant translocation from one galactic extremity to another faster than a synapse fire crossed a mortal brain. To these relentless inheritors, the concept of distance barely registered as an inconvenience. Through the agency of their gates, they spanned entire spiral arms with a thought, a fleeting mental impulse translated by flawless engineering. Each individual dolmen gate loomed as a monument, a triumph of sciences utterly lost to the inheritor races, carven structures resonating with a distinct ancient wisdom seemingly inherent heaven when newly forged. Activated, they ceased being monuments, transforming into focused windows through reality's membrane, shimmering with contained vital force. Across these thresholds, entire legions would pour fluid waves of metallic dread propagating across the stellar cartography, without ever violating the chaotic tides of the warp blankets, shielding the immaterium's predators, entirely immune to the commonplace voids between stars. For the Necrons operating within this level of absolute control, the concepts of unforeseen events or dangerous uncertainties dissolved into statistical impossibilities. The dolmen gates operated with intellect's own rhythm, precise, utterly calculated, flawlessly manageable. Yet the gates, significance far transcended mere travel conveniencethi, ascended into the realm of ultimate symbol, reflecting the Necrons' divine mastery over the heavens. While the scrambling younger races relied on hammering together crude vessels that groaned and faltered amongst cosmic dust, the Necrons transitioned with silent grace between worlds. They required no lumbering interstellar fleets ironclads, smashing through asteroid fields, or cruisers crawling through hyperspace shallows, were relics of clumsy adolescence to them mere gateways scattered across tomb complexes sufficed. These gates allowed deployment at the precise point desired, at the perfect moment dictated by an overlord's flawless calculus their legions manifesting, an alien genesis wrought from green lightning and glittering metal, where strategy dictated presence, obliterating established battle fronts and defensive plans conceived by minds unable to grasp velocities beyond the sublight. When victory dissolved into silence or necessity dictated withdrawal, they vanished with equal poise, leaving behind only echoes in the disturbed silence of a galaxy sensing an invisible master possessing keys to its every corner. Intrigue, however, clung to the dolmen gates like cosmic frost. Their profound complexity was fathomable only to a scarce few cryptex, even among the ageless strategists of the Necron dynasties. Whispers persisted, whispers woven into communication protocols, so guarded they bordered on encrypted silences suggesting a deeper symbiosis. That the dolmen gates shared an impossible bond with the enigmatic Blackstone fortresses, those stellar enigmas dating back to the unimaginable ages preceding the war in heaven. Scattered across galactic arms like immense, unyielding celestial scarecrows, these fortresses purportedly merged with the gates, forming unseen channels that completely circumvented the warp-emitting manipulations of spacetime itself. The twisting of cosmological threads to fit a logic programmed by overlords whose very consciousness transcended linearity. This improbable truth rested in the mental vaults of the loftiest cryptech lords, guarded secrets murmured only in secure mental partitions, where information decay was measured in millennia. For such technological evolution brushed against domains inhabited solely by beings once viewed practically as deities. One fundamental mystery cast doubt upon even this godlike certainty: a specter of instability. Despite representing foundational pillars of Necron restoration, insidious rumors arose had eons following their long entropy leap allowed fissures within the gates. Had galactic drift outside their immense control after the slumber introduced fatal errors into their calculations. Tomb worlds suddenly found connections severed, their gates inert, immense stone monoliths merely marking dead paths. Others flared at unpredictable frequencies, their shimmering surfaces promising not the calibrated star charts expected, but fault lines into terrifying, abandoned pockets of folded spacetime, passages into realms unrelated to designated stellar cartography. For the Storm Lord Imhotep, architect of his Szarekh dynasty's resurgence, the Dolmen Gates represented unparalleled tactical supremacy. Through them, his legions materialized as if spat from the void itself, striking deep within enemy fortification solar systems from their staging grounds before mundane Imperium fleet tracking could acknowledge preliminary sensor ghosts. Imhotep commanded the gates, power as a virtuoso, employs an instrument predictable exclusively to perfection within his own hands. While lesser warlords of upstart races attempted projecting his moves, his forces operated seemingly everywhere concurrently vanish from an engagement zone in one quadrant, concomitant horror unfolding light centuries distant, calibrated arrivals staging impossible encirclements and omnipresence, fostering maximum carnage. The gates weren't mere conveyances for Imhotep. They were fundamental weapons themselves, integrated commanders creating localized dominion. No species reliant on starships could ever countermaneuver or respond quickly enough against sudden detachments materializing kilometers above command spires. However, discontent simmered amongst various dynastic houses. Certain overlords possessed understanding deeper than Imhotep's militant pragmatism. They harbored growing distrust towards these ancient triggers of folded space and nanoscaled spacetime architectures. The whispers weren't just theories, but potential truths. Tomb complexes had seemingly vaporized upon attempted transit, entire war hosts stepping through gates only to become eternal ghosts, eternally unreported status flickering on Nest logic network trees. Other theories ventured darker still, maddening extrapolations of forces observing entities lingering at the ragged invisible fabric of accessible being perhaps drawn to the gates. Resonant energies like leviathans to bioluminescent depths, perhaps simply waiting for that single, inevitable malfunction, that point at which flawless control fractured, allowing entrance into dimensions Necronter shielding had yet conceived defending against. Very few, pilgrims of forgotten science along axes of time-fracturing sciences, like Orican the Diviner, postulated possibilities more astounding still. Perhaps these portals were not any technology in mere transit, but encoded Keeson-locking patterns entirely integrated within universal existence. Encoded original structures woven into galactic DNA that might reveal understanding, that might elevate dominion from stellar to innate cosmic architecture control, an alarming concept reserved only to minds which spanned galactic evolutionary timelines. Despite these tremors of doubt snaking through silent command protocols, the Dolmen Gates remained absolutely monumental regarding Necron ability projection and capability. Their preservation fundamentally enabled the Necrons to perpetually maintain abstract strategic initiative. They became masters of dislocation, appearing ever-present yet ephemeral, striking as required then dissolving back into dark matter void space that might stretch between opposing forces attempting formation. Unbeholden to relativistic timeframes or the insane lurking madness within the churning warp sea, they navigated within a dramatically higher dimensional stratum, operating solely on their own metronome precision, defined millions by minds operating at velocities incomprehensible to organic mental limitations. For these younger races, technologically modest but plentiful in their number species like the humans, lagging amidst their cherished Imperium, mere suspicion of dolmen activation, shimmering upon scanner arrays held paralyzing implications. Doom could strike unimpeded. They had become the quintessential symbols encapsulating the Necron terror. Able to manifest anywhere suddenly from orbit, over Hive Primus to installation cliffs, orbiting red giants initiating bombardments by legions awaiting only a reality crack to permeate armor that had dismissed initial star scans, showing nothing but vacuum moments prior. Within a cosmos stalked by constant conflict, looming predators invisible to sensors, filled with gravitational anomalies and dangerous blind hyperspace Edis predicaments, surrounding paths and possibilitist Necron alone remain detached operators on an almost inaccessible plane. Possessing gates, They transcended crude fleets. There no need for cumbersome interstellar craft. No requirement for maintaining complex logistical supply conduits feeding trillions of lives across hostile vacuums. Galactic travel for them held all complexities stripped away to near simplicity steps, taken through flickering entrances, woven from ancient psychic science, once crucial realities encoded into the right angles of their architecture. While various empires struggled navigating something resembling insanity-monitoring tides within realms, where reason died weeping, Necron legions slipped silently through rifts existing almost effortlessly, dissolving enemy arterial networks instantly. Rippling dolmen portals, spilling flickering unearthly light piercing void darkness over wreckage's planetary ruins, Necron host precisely manifesting as calculated variations upon stored star charts. The galaxy convulsed generationally with its recurring cycles of feudal glorious conflict grasping transient control, a tension that grew seemingly everlasting. Yet amongst these children stirred below hypersonic shelling, the Necron Empire entered maintaining its incomprehensible silence, its motives shifting as per millennia-long arcane protocols constructed upon foundations older than several fledgling species. Intentions veiled except internal processing crystalline logic weirs solving infinity theorems. Dolmen gates sporadically ignited throughout haunted star clusters, forgotten by all but cosmic drift's careful measurements. Their distinctive gleam alighting upon broken worlds kilometers deep Nightnin reflective cold illumination, traversing emptiness casting elongated shadows over the crumbling stone effigies. And they followed them, yet suddenly emerged amidst the silence, holding the fabric between galaxies entire Szarekh, the silent king, stirring unseen his name a resonance amongst silent tomb logic nets that other species cannot perceive, grasped only occasionally by those predatory minds, which remember ancient nightmares. Long before sleep ruled Necronter souls held him Szarekh, sire of dynastic faith surpassing legend. He guided his people against the impossible forces during the Heaven Citadel War, contrived the eternity bargain-cutting binding. Contracts towards immortality tears, ripped from material essences, souls eroded for an existence motionless radiant steel, burden beneath crown, was crushing enduring cataclysm, such that Szarekh chose exile leaving brother metals to the years, and silence journeying to intergalactic voids where absence remained purest form, without stars witnessing purgation. For time unmeasured his soul companions, endless untold consumed regret that bindings laid upon untold future consciousnesses, without seeking release untold epics unspooled. As Szarekh watched absorbing silence taking weight, yet ultimate void cannot erase responsibility, he felt shifting through cosmic currents time-adjacent form, returned witnessing, not empire awoken dominion, rather kingdom degraded. Fractured scattered logic primes like Imhotep storm lord grasping for fragmented power, struggling against ancient pre-existing schemas, fighting insignificant civilizations, possessing talismans of control, constructed during soporific rest upon planetoids, their people superior rank upon prehistoric slug species possessing frail biologies. Lives spanning only instants with limited vision, yet claimed inheritance through oblivion, whilst remnants of true inheritors their legions beyond ruinous cataclysm, scattered fleets struggling subjugating however Szarekh witnessing. This outcome could fathom causes regrets. Yet he was no lesser than Metal Lord equal comprehending cosmic strategy. He had engaged old ones before men or Eldar considered life organized created weaponry, shatter singular gods, lock their fragments with tesseract containments. Szarekh calculating mind saw existence as concepts reconstructed through power-structured conflict endless effect. Therefore, upon sight decay, silent logic subsumed despair analysis, applied something different reclamation, required something beyond hidden understanding step initiated resurrection, beginning settling over expansion plans, commoving through dark renewal sales, and sharing growing certainty, to all reawakened altogether wholly fares boundlessly towards their ultimate inevitable age. Szarikh's ancient consciousness, a mind molded by epics of solitude and burdened by the crushing memory of his people's near annihilation, pulsed with a cold assessment. Where lesser beings might drown in despair, the silent king perceived the very chaos engulfing the galaxy not as an end, but as the crucible heating for the Necron species' ultimate return. His gaze, honed by eons adrift in the silent void, pierced the tumultuous present. the decaying behemoth of the Imperium of Man, squatting ungainly across 1,000 scattered stars, straining against relentless siege from teeming, nameless foes. The glittering remnants of the once mighty Eldar, a dying breed whispering amidst the ruins of their stolen glory, pathetic in their long twilight. The monstrous, extragalactic horror of the Tyranid swarms, tendrils of infinite hunger stretching across the dark, devouring all light and life. The warp itself churning like a poisoned sea, regurgitating nightmare beasts from its suffocating depths into vulnerable reality. Within this maelstrom, Szarekh knew, lay the perfect, horrifically fertile ground. The Necron race, though shattered into disparate shards, its glory faded beneath the dust of tomb worlds, was not vanquished. The core strength pulsed still deep beneath dead soil and scarred stars. Their mastery over fundamental reality remained peerless, unrivaled by any fleeting upstart. Their legions of warriors, dispersed though they might be, retained the bone-deep discipline and terrifying power etched into their metallic forms by uncountable cycles of war. And their immortality, that terrible, hollowing gift he had unknowingly curtailed, bestowed a strategic patience none of these ephemeral younger races could fathom. This was the fulcrum upon which the fate of stars could turn. Szarekh knew with chilling certainty. If the scattered dynasties could be welded together once more, unified beneath a single indomitable will, the galaxy itself could be bent back into its rightful shape beneath Necron dominion. This was the imperative that drove him, the cold fire reigniting purpose within his eternal core. Yet this profound knowledge carried a bitter shadow, for the Silent King understood the monumental, near-impossible nature of the task. Unity was not a proclamation to be issued from a throne, not in this fractured age. The dynasties, each sealed for millennia within their dreaming tombs, had roused to find a changed universe brimming with tempting emptiness. Each was led by potent overlords, beings of immense ambition and towering, inherited hubris pharaons sculpted by a culture that venerated dominance and self-sufficiency. Theirs was a lineage that whispered rebellion against dynasty and chokehold alike. To follow the commands of another, even one whose name echoed through the deepest vaults of Necron history, even the architect of their empire itself, grated against the very essence of their nature. Many, like the brilliant, fiercely independent Imodic the Stormlord, whose strategic mind mapped galaxies and whose vast legions answered only to him, harbored not the slightest desire to bend their proud spine before Szarakh's returning majesty. Imodic coveted the command mantle for himself, believing his own unyielding vision the true path forward, and he was far from alone in this consuming ambition. Szarekh, however, watched these machinations not with shock, but with the weary understanding of one who had navigated the labyrinthine, treacherous currents of Necron court politics long before the war in heaven ignited. Rivalries were as ingrained as necrodermis. To compel the dynastic lords, mere authority was insufficient. The weight of his ancient titles, the resonance of his legendary deeds during the height of their power, these artifacts of a distant past, held limited sway over the arrogant pride lions ruling the awakened tombs. Instead, he would need to demonstrate, with crystal, unyielding logic, that cooperation was not submission but necessity. He would need to rekindle within their hollowed souls the cold, terrible embers of the drive that once consumed their species, the yearning for galactic domination, the inescapable purpose that ultimately sealed their doom and exile. Only absolute unity offered a path back to that pinnacle. And so, abandoning the trappings of absolute command that suited his former reign, Szarekh embarked upon a course of glacial deliberation and supreme subtlety. He became a phantom presence within the shifting galactic chessboard, traversing the gulfs not as a sovereign demanding fealty, but as a shadow moving with immense patience along the edges of unfolding events. He sought out the dynasties individually, descending upon worlds long sequestered, seeking audiences not from a pedestal of ancient kingship, but presenting himself before the pharaons as a peer, an equal forged in the same crucible of immortality. He did not pronounce demands, he offered proposals. His voice, silent yet resonating through intricate command protocols and transmitted manifestos, spoke of partnership, of collective resurgence. He painted visions not of servitude to a crown, but of a grand, unstoppable empire reforged, greater than even their greatest legends recounted. Under his singular, undivided guidance, He promised the possibility to transcend the debilitating fractures, to reclaim not merely dominion over isolated star clusters, but absolute hegemony over all existence. Some overlords yielded with surprising speed, particularly those whose own scarred tomb worlds bore the brutal brunt of time's erosion or the depredations of alien interlopers. In Szarakh's return, they perceived the deep calm born of unimaginable experience, the unwavering certainty of a leader who had navigated extinction's brink and persisted through the eons of exile. They sensed stability, a way to anchor their fragmented power against the storm. Others remained profoundly wary, haunted by the implications of his reappearance, their ancient suspicions whispering of hidden agendas or retribution for long-forgotten slights. Yet, even these doubters, seasoned rulers embodying Necron aristocratic hauteur, could feel the undeniable resonance of the Silent King's presence. He embodied legend made manifest, the architect who defied gods and shattered empires. His return stirred something ancient and vast within the labyrinthine pathways of their consciousness, a collective memory slumbering but unbroken. It was faint recognition, perhaps, of ultimate purpose deferred, now resurfacing with seismic force. But alongside this nascent recognition burned consuming hostility. Imodic remained utterly unbowed, watching Szarakh's movements not with curiosity but wariness. Others held similar ambitions, having tasted supremacy over their discrete holdings and relishing the unfettered exercise of their power. To them, the Silent King was an artifact, a relic of a bygone necessity, the embodiment of the before that imprisoned them in their metallic nightmares. His strategies represented a stifling return to centralized power they instinctively rejected, a terminus for their own dreams of tyrant lordship over the reborn Necron Empire. They would war against him, openly or insidiously, before bending knee. Szarekh knew this deep in his core. He understood that unity, that survival, could only come through coercion. Some dynasties required persuasion, others could be enticed, but a stubborn, potent few, the Imodics, would need to be shattered entirely before their remnants could be welded into the foundation of the new empire. His path, therefore, wound through treachery and potential conflict. Like a master architect laying invisible stress points for a future citadel, the Silent King moved relentlessly, forging pacts with pliable courts, isolating defiant pharaons with cunning diplomatic maneuvers, gathering loyalist forces piece by chilling piece, meticulously constructing the webwork upon which the great Necron resurgence would inevitably rise. Patience was his most potent weapon, tempered over countless millennia scouring the emptiness outside the galactic rim. He had endured the unfathomable silence reliant on this very patience. Now, as the galaxy convulsed, fragmented, consumed by the futile fires of lesser beings, the moment he had passively sculpted through endless time finally breathed its first shuddering gasp. Szarekh the Silent King had returned from the void, and in his wake surged the nascent potential for the Necron race to reclaim eternity, denying the galaxy its impending doom by imposing their own cold order. This galaxy he surveyed felt impossibly, suffocatingly crowded since the Great Sleep enveloped their tomb worlds in isolation. Where once Necron fleets had knit stars into seamless webs of dominion across an orderly, near-empty firmament, absolute masters exerting suzerainty over fledgling struggle and silence, a bustling, chaotic frenzy now reigned. Brought low by pride, they had slumbered beneath eternal dunes and the frozen lithosphere of dead spheres, and in that vast interim, the younger races had frothed across the cosmos like insects infesting a corpse. Empires bloomed grotesquely upon bones, wars raged over trifles like scavengers fighting over scraps, entire sectors reshaped by minds devoid of the proper reverence earned by eons. Now, rousing, the Necron legions gazed upon a reality transformed and distorted beyond prior imagining. Uncontested mastery had dissolved into a cacophony of inconsiderable voices. Dominating the visible sky, its edges fraying yet its grasp iron, sprawled the decease-blighted imperium of man. A lumbering, decaying organism bloated by sheer, unfathomable numbers, it exerted its cancerous gravity across millions of worlds, a mindless tide of humanity washing over systems like cosmic filth. The Eldar, those fading ghosts, still flitted at the corners of perception's spectral visions, darting through the unseen tunnels of the webway, clinging with pathetic tenacity to depleted craft worlds like fading jewels reflecting a setting sun. a shadow puppet show of the vast psychic dominion they once commanded. And piercing this tumultuous veneer from voids galactic and profound, flowed the tyrannid swarms, a creeping, insatiable biological contagion devouring reality star by star, existence itself reduced to fleeting sustenance on an unremarked path to oblivion. To the Necron mindset, ancient beyond comprehension, these squabbling, short-lived vermin were merely crude interlopers infesting the skeletal remains of an inheritance rightfully theirs. They had witnessed narcissistic civilizations rise and fall with tedious predictability, cyclical entities granted fleeting prominence by cosmic chance, while the Necrons had ascended beyond such fragile constraints. These newcomers, imprisoned within decaying flesh and blinkered temporal perspectives, were incapable of grasping eternal truths, let alone challenging the refined supremacy inherent in Necron thought. Yet, ingrained deeper than pride, was the intrinsic logic of survival. Szarakh's mind acknowledged the reality. The galaxy was indeed fundamentally altered. Reducing these chaotic elements was a necessary precursor to reclaiming dominion. Their raw potential for destruction, born from desperation or ignorance, constituted disruptive vectors. Among them, the Imperium stood colossal in its brute persistence. Immense it was, coiled upon itself, billions of souls scrambling through existence defined by ignorance and pain, fleets vast enough to shadow worlds drowning the void momentarily, a territorial fungus consuming regions with relentless, dull inevitability. Yet, for this size, it remained brittle. Its armies stretched gossamer thin across impossible borders, its holdings perpetually bleeding from chaotic cults and pushing Xeno's predation, its leadership blighted by ineptitude, corruption, and factionalism pressing against its weakened core. The Imperium struggled perpetually on the precipice of implosion, a creature driven by raw desperation rather than purpose. To the Necron analyzers, its existence induced a faint echo of annoyance coupled with a sterile, unemotional respect born from observation. Fear was illogical. Contempt was easy. Yet paradoxically, abhorrent as its chaotic weakness was, the Imperium's sheer dogged refusal to extinguish commanded a certain detached recognition. It was a monument to unsustainable persistence overriding inherent fragility. The Necrons, masters of cold calculus, understood the Imperium would ultimately consume its own center of gravity under relentless pressure. It was a significant, obstructive singularity, potentially destructive due to its sheer mass and unpredictability, but an obstacle to be meticulously neutralized rather than a competitor capable of rival the infinite empire. If the Imperium embodied despairing chaos resisting inevitable entropy, the Eldar represented a calculated detonation point of history, a searing reminder of a conflict written across the cosmic scar tissue millennia gone yet eternally present, the war in heaven. These beings, once the favored constructs of the ancient, vanished old ones, had stood as a united force against the Necrons and their eventual C'tan masters. Alliance long shattered vanished, yet its psychic wounds festered through time. The Necron soul drives housed a cold crystalline quadrant reserved solely for implacable enmity towards the Eldar. They were not mere opponents in political struggle. They were the remaining votaries of an undeserving progenitor species, a constant elfin thorn embodying the arrogance that had denied Necronter destiny. That past war's shadows clung like toxic particulates to every interaction. Conversely, these fading wraiths knew the annihilation buried beneath metal worlds, fear-etching pathways through their fragile psychic remnants as tombs awoke. To them, Necrons were patient extremis, nightmares made tangible resurrection protocols mocking Eldar pretensions to endurance. Swift dancers countered by engines of indomitable purpose. An ancient hostility flowed through crafting strands linking ancient Eldari consciousness, a conflict reaching into universes beyond this fractured reflection. Every tomb awaking prompted shadow craft worlds attentive within the impossible realms, stealth predators across the webway wounds acknowledging existence. Diminished or not, reduced, sculpted into survival-focused exodites and weeping god-entombed cult builders, Eldari remained dangerous phantoms capable of wounding where defenses faltered. Heirs of Old One refuse embedded like painful synapsenodes within the great corpus reborn. Yet dread felt inadequate as a response. More often, the Necron overlords experienced a deep, kinetic predatory satisfaction at Eldar presence. Confrontation wasn't fear. It provoked contempt intertwined with inevitability, a reflexive desire for obliterative retaliation against the last echo of their creators. Every Eldar fleet consumed by cosmic fire was a monument enacted payback upon memory, an atom of vengeance purified and actualized. But however bitter that cosmic feud tasted upon the collective substrate, its familiarity rendered it containable against the backdrop of the newcomer monstrous intrusion, a primal leviathan from intergalactic wilderness. Their existence an affront to Necron cosmology, the Tyranids. They presented ultimate challenge beyond ambition, beyond hatred, concepts utterly alien to them. The swarm possessed no ideology grappling for justification. They manifested sheer appetite given galactic scale. Entire planets dismembered, populations consumed wholesale, ecosystems actively dismantled into nothing more than organic slurry. They conquered nothing beyond the cessation of resistance as a prelude to feast. They divided nothing, property that which is consumed. Their entire existence defined refusal of life to exist after their wake passed through a system. Synapse collapses tactics, overwhelming force consistently replenished from endlessly spawning tides, proved profoundly difficult even for Necron legions accustomed to resurrection. Crib deaths piled exponentially against waveforce exerted across invasion pathways. Face shield technology glimmered impossibly. Crackled barriers consuming hive tendrils into non-space provided tactical breathing space, perhaps fracturing furious swarms temporarily forcing redirection strategies yet sufficient. Momentary victory inevitably meant return expeditions exponentially scaled beyond prior reports. Against foes driven by desire or vengeance, there existed strategy leveraging weakness behind motivation. The Tyranid possessed a single, annihilating engagement strategy perpetual swarm advancing linearly. They existed as solvent washing away meaningful conflict, reducing every engagement into attrition. Silent King perceived this primal, anomaly focused through lenses unaccustomed to such simplicity. While Imperium was disease, Eldar a familiar scar, the swarm constituted a terminal event, horizon approaching mathematically certain destruction unless arrested. Annoyance shaped relations with other species. An undertone of millennia-acquired existential dread colored strategic consideration concerning hive fleets, demanding absolute prioritization even over traditional enmities. It constituted universal soil collapse threatening route. Therefore, fractured yet potent, betrayed internally by competing overlords like emotic dreaming of rival kingdoms, threatened externally from innumerable angles crowned by an incomprehensible devourer, the Necron dynasties confronted a universe functionally unrecognizable. Old certainties dissolved before emergent chaos. Yet purpose runs in oscillations beyond mere biological lifelines. Time isn't fleeting when you've traversed intergalactic voids measured in megacycles. Patience remained there strategically. Generations came, empires crumbled with insectal inconsequence. Power consolidation resumed. The Silent King gathered ephemeral struggles under dispassionate observation. Power continued subtly shifting like continents colliding beneath ocean unseen. Bases across ruined star systems achieved alignment, activating progressively towards imminent convergence. Eternal eyes charted meticulously the tempo of imminent catastrophe and opportunity cosmic scale. For Szarekh, glacially orchestrating the inevitable resurrection, what were centuries? What were worlds burning to invaders? Only calibration vectors shaping ultimate reclamation, routing around humanity's spreading tumors. Placing Eldar remains precisely for annihilation, cascade, specifically antagonizing their fragile soul state survival points. Studying Tyranid growth seeking critical weakness, exploitable through engineered recombinant reality collapse weaponry. Time is patient with immortals organizing eternity one motionless step, through shadow steps, gaze down from vast singularity balconies, above eclipsing rival pharaohs, seemingly independent awaiting uniting call perhaps, heard not by ear, but sudden crippling disruption, sweeping obsolete lords, aside leaving unified legions, facing the true void hunter awakening. They would inherit inevitably, once the reconstruction protocol, phased fully active liberating systemic predation vectors. Millennia of reckoning reciting, slowly towards ignition, crescendo across threads, woven silently despite Imhotep's rebellionary displays, making madness futile dance for those whose patience gathers stars unto dominion definitively without terminus. Deep within the unlit fathoms of interstellar space, where the ancient radiance of dying suns stretched thin and attenuated, and a profound silence wrapped the void like a burial shroud, the Necron Empire slumbered and stirred. Once an epoch past, its dominion had eclipsed the galaxy entire, its legions marching with machine perfection, a sovereignty absolute, uncontested by any race before or since. But those eons had crumbled into the dust of forgotten tomb worlds, leaving the empire shattered, fragmented into 1,000 shards, each dynasty clawing impotently at the faded specter of its ancestral glory. Where once potent kings commanded stars, now awoke metal lords to a cosmos irrevocably altered, stars they had birthed and ruled now teeming with chaotic interlopers, creatures of fleeting flesh and bone, scavengers squabbling amidst ruins that were already ruins to Necron memory. And these Necron lords, once unified under the implacable will of their silent sovereign, now stood fragmented, splintered into countless dynastic courts, each wreathed in isolation, each locked in a solitary struggle to reclaim mere scraps of a lost empire that had spanned galaxies. Some dynasties spilled forth their relentless legions in silent conquering tides, eager to rewrite star maps in cold metal. Others, cautious archivists of vanished splendor, bided within the echoing grandeur of their own tomb complexes, guardians of ancient theorems and dissector beams, seeking salvation through science and restored architecture. Yet, beneath the fractious diplomacy and dynastic squabbling, an ancient ember burned undimmed in every necrodermis breast: control. Control of the galaxy that had slipped their grasp, control of a future yet unwritten, control, ultimately, over their own eternally fixed, soulless destinies. This shared ambition, profound and unyielding as the living metal composing their forms, simmered beneath the fractured surface. But unity eluded them still. They warred amongst themselves, a cosmos of rival lords and temporal pharaons, each overlord convinced that their singular schematic for resurrection held the sole key to restoration, each vision burning with a lonely intensity. They were stars scattered across the blackest conceivable void, each blazing fiercely with immortal will, yet tragically unable to bridge the yawning gulfs between them, their light isolated, their command circumscribed. Amidst this constellation of grinding dynastybones, one figure strode like a dark sun gathering its shattered planets. Szarekh, the silent king, had returned. Now he stood, resolute and burdened, in the immense heart of his personal sepulchral world, deep within the chill, soundless halls of a palace invisible beneath millennia of planetary ice. Around him, ranked to the vanishing point in obsidian gloom, stood the legions of his own dynasty, their forms gleaming dully under the sterile light of ancient chronometers, perfect, motionless statues of warforged metal, awaiting only the electric spark of his command. The silent king's eyes, burning with the eerie, unwavering viridian fire of necrodermis, swept across holographic constellations, observing the turmoil of a younger, hotter universe. The terrible weight of choice, heavy and cold as neutron star matter, compressed his ancient consciousness. It was he who had made the bargain, choices carved into history with the brutal finality of starkling weaponry, choices that snatched his once immortal people from the claws of extinction, but offered them instead a victory that tasted of annihilation. He had sought immortality for the Necronter, a race succumbing to accelerated stellar cancers under agony-world suns, and achieved it in metal and silence. Yet the price was an incomparable agony. The very spark of soul life extinguished within them, consumed as cosmic tithe by the Cetan they betrayed too late. He had led them to triumph over the old ones, that ancient war that reshaped creation, and thereby paved the way for the fractured ruin that now greeted their return. Standing now on the nifage of a future fraught with peril and promise, Szarekh contemplated the cold paradox. Had he been right? The galaxy swam vast and indifferent, and the Necron race endured, an endless span yawning before them, yet even eternity accrued its own unbearable burdens. Szarekh felt that weight distilled, magnified upon his regal shoulders like the accretion of dead stars. He had wandered the sheer, airless gulfs between galaxies for epochs beyond mortal counting, a solitary figure seeking, what? Atone, reverse that which was etched in fate, return vibrant life to the husk of metal. The bitter truth, long since accepted as immutable physical law, was unchangeable. The former selves were ash scattered upon dying stellar winds. They were beings forged of eternal, unyielding metal. Their souls were cured and consumed eons past. The die was cast irrevocably. Yet, even steeped in this melancholic acceptance of cosmic damnation, a core of indomitable determination forged Szarekh. He had not voyaged back across the ebb and tide of deep time merely to witness the thousand dynasties clash like children over grave goods until the final stellar engine failed. He returned to lead. To unify the scattered, squabbling shards of his people, to weld the fractured dynasties back into the cohesive, unstoppable engine of stellar conquest they were designed to be, and thereby rebuild the empire that had once commanded the spirals of the galaxy entire. He comprehended the monumental task. The overlords were ancient, proud beyond measure, swollen with long sleep dreams of personal dominance. Each saw themselves as sole architect of the future Necron dawn, rightful claimant to temporal sovereignty, and none moved by whisper or will to bow easily to another. Even their king returned. But Szarekh possessed a patience deep as the galactic core. He had exhibited it for 10,000 lifetimes of lesser races. He could extend it yet, a slow, grinding pressure applied with the inexorability of tectonic plates. Waiting was their inheritance. He knew, with the cold logic characteristic of his race tempered by unique experience, that the future, the very existence of the Necron form, pivoted upon unity. To truly reclaim the cosmos from the quivering ephemera that infested it, they needed the collective strength and directed, cold intellect of their golden age, a unified metal fist striking outward. And Szarekh, encumbered though he was by the universe's heaviest crown of regret, was resolute to achieve this, axe by ideology toppled, dynasty by dynasty bound once more. Observing the panoramic stellar decay in his citadel's absolute, tomb-cold silence, Szarekh contemplated destinies unfolding. The galaxy, for all its turbulent, infantile metamorphosis, remained in his unshakable assessment the property of the Necron species. The Necronter might be dust, the Necron form eternal. The younger races, swarming chaotically bright and loud, bled lives in wars lasting barely an eye-blink within the Necron's millennia, upon millennia their triumphs hollow, their empire's sandcastles facing tides of time measured in stellar evolutions. They were fleeting shadows flickering against the bleak canvas of infinity, while the Necrons were the canvas, the enduring bedrock of history itself. Even fractured, they remained the rightful lords of eternity. The path to reunion, however, shimmered uncertain as mirages on desert world horizons. The dynasties snarled at each other's territorial encroachments like Starscythe sharpening against Starscythe. The younger races, fragile as they appeared within the conceptual Ideep time, possessed a terrifying, raw inertial momentum born of vast numbers and reckless desperation. Szarekh understood with chilling clarity that retaking their inheritance demanded more than the brute awakening of slumbering superweapons and legions of unkillable warriors, though those were crucial tools. It would demand exquisite orbital interference tactics disguised as interstellar diplomacy. It would demand the glacial chess move stratagems only immortal minds could sustain. Wisdom cold as night-black nebula dust, patience monolithic, and the indomitable will to endure setbacks that would obliterate entire mortal civilizations. These were the shield harmonics alongside the war scythes. And Szarekh, bearing the accumulated, crushing weight of all the eons since the bargain, held these qualities in unequaled measure. The Necrons would surge once more, a tide of polished necrodermis rising tide-like from worlds across the spiral arms. The Silent King's return guaranteed that destiny, as fixed as orbit. Yet, staring into the encompassing stellar map, its unfamiliar constellations mapped rigidly by artificial intellect, Szarekh acknowledged the razor-fine edge of chance. Galactic silence crept pervasive currently over vast tracts of void, the quiet of contemplative immortals and of sleeping Kron, the quiet preceding planetary extinguishment protocols. But such unnatural, interdynasty silence could not endure perpetually. The Necrons, amid all their dynastic hubris, all their technological terror steeped in incomprehensible sciences, were not the universe's sole passengers. Darker, unfathomable hungers crawled beneath the starlight, predating even the Necronter's cancer. As Szarekh pondered the intricate web of destiny awaiting his people, contemplating the agonizingly complex puzzle box of reclaiming rulership without annihilating the galaxy they sought to rule, he remained unbreakably, terrifyingly determined. Conflict of unknowable scale lay coiled, waiting to strike across the stars, but Szarekh, architect of their damnation and their sole hope of redemption, was steeled for it. The galaxy stretched infinitely vast, a tapestry woven of fire and void, an opponent demanding respect. But the Necrons were eternal, time forged their chain, and Szarekh, the Silent King, would shepherd them back unto absolute dominion. Within the deep, patient quiet seated across unknown corners of that galaxy, where ancient stars maintained their indifferent celestial patrol patterns, indifferent to the brief, flaring conflicts pulsing like arrhythmic heartbeats on scattered worlds below, the Necrons maintained their unblinking watch. Hidden away in tombs submerged beneath planetary deserts sculpted by winds howling since before continents formed, or entombed in catacombs sunk deep within ice-sheathed worlds where geothermal whispers were the only memory of motion, they remained utterly, unnaturally still. Time carved no lines upon their faces nor eroded their structures. Entropy skittered off nanoscarab fields. For while the younger race's vehement, ignorant constructs of effervescent life surged violently and chaotically across star lanes, conquering tracts of void as ephemeral as their own lifespans, the Necrons, governed by logic colder than the deepest space and patience stretching beyond the conception even of long-lived species, merely surveyed. They waited, as immortals must, as entities forged by a fundamental shift in creation's axioms. Their legacy was etched upon the fundamental strata of cosmic time, enduring vast beyond the temporal blink that was any mortal empire's apogeic collapse arc. Impossibly old, an ancient intellect shimmering with an aura of primordial stellar collapse, the Necron race predated the strident monolith that was the imperium of man, predated the elegance and sorrow of the Eldar's zenith, predated the fiery birth throes of stars currently aglow. Once time so far-flung it was myth even to immortals, they ruled the material universe entire as an uncontested dynasty, a supreme command structure enforced by algorithmic precision and undeathly legions. That era, those absolute days, were devoured by the long sleep measured in millions of revolutions of galactic cores. They entered tombs while continents were molten. And yet, crucially, the Necrons did not vanish into extinction nor degrade into myth. They simply ceased active engagement, receding into stasis within worlds draped in secrecy, waiting out the pyrotechnic but brief ascendancies interrupting their eternal sequence. The desperate actions of these younger species presented not threat, merely residue. The humans, laborers frantically patching their crumbling, sprawling imperium, fought ceaseless brushfire wars at interstellar scales that merely exhausted fleeting resources. The Eldar, architects of such cosmic horror they were forever haunted, their astronomic empire a fading dream, now huddled dwindling like beacon lights flickering towards final particulate discharge. The crude orcs, existentially primed for violence, their rampages intense as hypernova, yet as cosmically transient, flaring brilliant before vanishing into entropy leaving only echoes and spores. To the Necrons, perceiving time through lenses polished across millennia, these phenomena were negligible pyrotechnic spores sparking momentarily against a boundless, ancient night before vanishing entirely forgotten into the interminable dark. The Necrons, composed of necrodermis and sustained by quite incomprehensible sciences, inhabited time rather than being driven through it. Time was favorable, it was leverage. They could afford to wait indefinitely, having mastered its currents when they traded fleeting biological constraints for permanent metallic existence. A pedagogy learned harshly during their soul-barren pact with the terrible entities known as the Cetan, trading soul life for immortality. No decay gnawed at them, no finite endurance imposed pressure. They could stand poised, dormant, for starbirth epochs until the galactic tableau finally shifted into an alignment conducive for absolute reclamation. Therefore, while humans erected their cities of stone and steel, destined to flake away within geological minutes on the Necron clock, while Eldar preened over prophecies whispered by gods they themselves killed weeping feudal lamentations for kin, swept into the cosmic dustbin, the Necrons but observed. Their gaze was detached, rarefied, the Olympian perspective upon insects swarming over a midden heap. They witnessed the chaotic rivalries choking the Imperium's vital arteries, the fractious internal politics accelerating their societal decay. They cataloged the Eldar's increasingly frenzied and futile attempts to forestall their extinction velocity individuality waning. They tracked the indentatus worm expansion of the Tyranid hive fleets, that vast biological consumption, wave undeniable at biological scales, yet fundamentally blind to symbolic constructs like empire, capable only of cognitively consuming matter without building legacy. And this cold, analytical witnessing yielded irrefragably a damning prognosis and exquisite opportunity for the Necronter's inheritors. Their time approached. Again. For the Necront, time wasn't garrison enemy necessitating frantic reaction. It was strategic reserve accumulating interest. The younger species possessed ultimately tragically brief windows of existence guaranteeing their downfall. That tremendous imperium was already hemorrhaging control, splintering internally under its cancerous bureaucracy, with rebellions metastasizing at non-recoverable rates. The Eldar as a species existed on borrowed chronocycles, borrowed desperately from dead psychic gods, drawing backward singular breaths. The Tyranids, whilst terrifyingly monolithic in consumption, were but instinctual expressions with goal defined solely as continuation until matter exhaustion. The Necrons, on the other hand, bore purpose, a singularity of intent forged millennia before terrestrial life crawled forth. From the bargain's inception, through the genocide of the Old Ones, their ambition remained: ownership of the material universe's principal components. And while the butcherbirds, these younger species, consumed each other over decaying remnants of worlds, the Necrons had casually industrialized during forgotten cycles of expansion. The Silent Ones maintained their unending watch, knowing with deep certainty deeper than bedrock formed beneath solar tides that sooner or later, stars themselves would redirect their proper service registration among Necronter dynasties. Silent King Szarekh, millennia-spanning architect-monarch soul-scorched by agonized choice, remained the ultimate prophet of this conviction patrician, observers across civilizations. He witnessed stellar empires ascend dazzlingly, only to blink celestial decades later, and fade towards inevitable dissolution beyond intervention. He beglate the crumbling of his once cohesive, pristinely ordered empire into this current fracto-charadrich tapestry competition during the slumber disturbance. Returning exhausted across cosmic span from depths beyond galactic periphery, he sought not undo the past, only forge something survivable from the future bleakness spreading, contained within metal memory matrices. Reclamation couldn't be brute tidal wave. Mortal fleets had repurposed lost tech erratically, unpredictably, their numbers massively formidable even if unity among them remained elusive due impulsive biology lead. But patience was technology perfected into existence, unafflicted mortality entropy flaws. Szarekh could perfectly conveniently observe the younger races busy massacring each other across the stage, noting the fractures widening in marble plascrete imperium foundations and calculating reports upon entropy, decay constants, affecting Eldar regression, and mapping Tyranid vectors analysis carefully. Without comment judgment beyond prevailing theorem assessment, their eternal time encroached slowly, extinction vectors for others intensified algebraically. Cold night and metal endured ever. Flesh decays exponentially always has very reliably against stately pedestrian chronometry lived without comprehensive possible explanation through shorter-term organic perception. Patience, observation, calculation. The silent ends justified silent meantime. Tomb's integral underdust awaits signal flares correct moment. Stars shan't flee them ultimately, they always revert primary ownership registry to First Lords, not ephemeral squatters. Syntax correction, minor administrative issue tractable long enough interlude of eternal awareness-clad architects nesting under planets. The galaxy shifted above their tombs, yet the Necrons alone clung to the ancient verity. This realm was theirs, always, utterly. Eventually, this present silence, this frozen darkness cradling their sepulchral worlds, was merely an interlude. The strutting empires of younger races, their bright sparks guttering already within lifetimes measured in heartbeats, would soon grasp the cold, eternal truth. The Necrons were never defeated, never destroyed, only waiting. Deep within lightless vaults and forsaken cradles, titans stirred, vast legions awaited the perfect celestial moment for their awakening. The icy calculus of ageless minds focused on one consuming ambition: restoration, dominion, to stride the stars, reclaiming what children had stolen. Even now, the brief flare of those younger lights seemed to dim, their vigor faltering against the crushing weight of time the Necrons commanded. They observed with endless patience, biding with unbroken purpose. The silent void would soon crack beneath the relentless beat of marching metal, the deep thrum of engines eons old, the gnashing of armies restored. The Necrons waited still, always waiting. Their time was almost here.